cold steel floors, warriors of forgotten lore. Gods of war and elder kings, titan falls and chaos reigns. Every world a battleground, the echoes of lost souls resound. Warmaster leads with burning light. Into the fray we ride tonight. Stories told of ancient might, epic glory in our sight. Force fall back when he's in sight. Elder flee into the night, but to his foes he's the pain. In this universe of pain. In the warp where shadows creep, ancient evils never sleep. Astartes rise with bolters poised, in the Emperor's name their praise. Warmaster leads with burning light. Into the fray we ride tonight. Stories told of ancient might, epic glory in our sight. Force fall back when he's in sight. Elder flee into the night, but to his foes he's the pain. In this universe of pain. In this universe of pain. In the warp where shadows creep, ancient evils never sleep. Astartes rise with bolters poised, in the Emperor's name their praise. War condoms beneath the sand, awaken to reclaim their lands. Early swarms dark in the sky, only the sun will survive. From terror's throne to distant stars, the galaxy burns with endless stars. When our sails etched into the void, no one else's name, worlds are destroyed.
Hello, welcome to Loreman Begins, where I'm going to basically spend the next 2.5 hours gushing about some random piece of 40k lore. In this case, we're going to be talking about probably my favorite character job or career in the 40k universe, and that's Commissars. I love him. Oh, he's on my list. Don't you worry. We talked about. Good to have you here, Eris. Yes, he's, like I said, he's on my list. But this is going to be kind of extensive. I spent a long time working on these notes, and so we're going to kind of go from top to bottom. So what I'm going to start off with. Just in case anybody watches this and is not familiar with Warhammer 40k, it's a far distant sci-fi universe. 40k stands for 40,000, like the year 40,000 AD. So, tens of millennia, tens of thousands of millennia from our current time. And it's grimdark. It's crazy. It's fantastic. I love it. Yes, right? Where he's just like, he's flexing through the coat. It's fantastic. They did some great work on his art, I have to say. Oh, before I continue, everything you see here and everything I talk about is property of Games Workshop. I do not own any of this. None of this is my creation. I'm just talking about it, giving my commentary on it, because I do, despite some things, still have a deep love for the setting. And actually, I forgot about my ambient. How dare I? How dare I? Let's turn this down a bit. Let me know if it's too loud, if it's overpowering. Don't be afraid to say something. I won't be insulted. Although I may have to turn it down for myself. Goodness gracious, that's loud. Yeah, let's try... There. Whoa! Damn, son! Holy shit! Well, thank you, sir. Wow, that's insane. I don't even know what to say, dude. That's mind-blowing. Thank you. That's all I can say. Oh, shit. That's awesome, man. You just helped us hit one of my community goals, so that's awesome. I don't even... I'm stunned. I gotta turn down. Nope, it's gonna force me to hear it. Weird. I wonder why that is. Well, hopefully that's not too distracting for me. If it is, I might end up turning off the ambient music, because I don't know why it's forcing me to blow my ear holes out. So weird to me. Oh well. So yeah, thank you again, Eris. That's awesome. Yeah, that's... I want to leave it on, because I spent... I mean, not that long. I just entered prompts and threw in instrumentals, but it's fine. I'll live without it. Bro. That's just crazy. Why are you playing so loud in my ears? Like, even the volume mixer, it's not turning it down. I don't get it. I don't understand. Oh wait, let's try this. Nope. Still loud as shit for me, I don't know why. What if I just turn it down? Does it still come through for you guys? It looks like it is. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Invite it. Anybody who's into 40k, I will try to do you proud. Alright. So let's actually get in on this. So Commissar is they're a political officer, and so they're what that means is they are in charge of the morale for the Astra Militarum, aka the Imperial Guard, and the Navis Imperialis, the Imperial Navy for us low Gothic heathens. It's good, fantastic. So this oh, and all the music, so the instrumental stuff, the ambient stuff that's playing right now, that was just well, all of it was AI generated from Suno. But the intro, the lyrics for that were mostly written by me and cleaned up by ChatGPT and Grok. There's a little bit of AI help in there, but most of that was me, and so I'm pretty proud of that. Anyway, so the Commissars operate out of the Commissariat, also referred to as the Officio Prefectus. Probably going to butcher some of these High Gothic names because it's Latin, and I can't do Latin. Anyway, but yeah, so the Commissariat handles Commissars from top to bottom, so everything from their recruitment to their training to where they're deployed is all determined by the Commissariat. But their primary duty is, like I said, overseeing the morale of Imperial Guard troopers. And what that means is they are on the front lines attached to different Imperial Guard regiments. And basically, if they think you are incompetent or cowardly, or if you try to run away, they motivate you to not do that. And, well, the way they do that most often is to shoot one of you. And not, just put one in the knee or whatever. No. It's summary execution. They just kill you. So, at least that's how most of them operate. But yeah, and that goes for anybody in the Imperial Guard. So that could be your frontline ground pounder trooper all the way up to a Lord General. Now, obviously, they're going to need more evidence the higher up the chain you go, but at a regimental command level, they can just cap... Hi, Cat! They can just cap, say, a colonel or a captain that's running the regiment. And so... but aside from that, and that's like the meme about Commissars, right? They're very brutal. They will just shoot a trooper for little to no reason, and they're super devoted to the God Emperor. And when regulations are basically straight from the word of the God Emperor, essentially. That's the stereotype, anyway. But the flip side to that, and that's the side that one of the sides that they don't cover as much, or is not explained in the meme, is they're also meant to be neutral observers and advisors in the field. Hey, Kat, I'm pleased to see you here. Eris went insane and gifted a bunch of subs, and I'm still reeling from it. So, thank you again for that, Eris. Let's see here. Where did I lose myself? Yes. So, neutral observers and advisors. So, they're meant to look at the bigger picture. They're supposed to know things that, your standard guard officer may not know about. Such as, the particulars of a Tyranid Hive fleet and how they operate, or chaos corruption, or that sort of thing. So things that most guard officers won't have first-hand knowledge of. And that's not always the case. It depends on where these officers have been deployed. So, they could spend a decade fighting, say, the Eldar somewhere, and because the Astra Militarum or the Departamento Munitorum, the administrative logistics side of the Imperium, they will send a guard regiment anywhere. They don't care who it is or where they're going. They just see a number and they put a number in another place. As an example of that, so the Commissar Kane's unit that he's assigned to is, one of them, the one that is brought up the most, is the 597th, Valhallan 597th, and they are from an ice world, and so they're like superb cold weather warriors. They're shock troops, like amazing cold warrior troops. They'll get sent to deserts frequently. And these are people who are used to like comfortably existing in like 0-degree weather or lower. Anyway, so yeah, the point is that with Commissars, they also will give information to, appropriate amounts of information anyway to Imperial Guard officers when they lack it. So most of the time with them, to facilitate this, they will assign Commissars to regiments that are not from their home world, to help them be more neutral. So yeah, that's a big thing. Although I have seen Krieg Commissars serving in Krieg units in some of the art. I feel like I've seen them in other units as well, but I can't remember specifically. But the thing is if you have a Krieg Commissar, you're kind of, you're gonna have a bad time. And I'm sure I'll have an episode at some point covering the Krieg. So moving on from that, so let's kind of cover their origins. And actually, this is something that I had heard in passing. Gaunt, yes, exactly. And he's on my list too, where we'll be covering all the big Commissar names. And one newer edition too, which actually, yeah, anyway. So, I learned some stuff about Commissars that I had heard tangentially, but it was kind of like, I don't know, it doesn't, when like when you read something and you're like, oh yeah, I remember hearing about that, but like, that's it. So in this case, the Commissars actually have origins that go all the way back to the Great Crusade, and basically there were proto-Commissars, referred to as discipline masters, and so they were responsible for maintaining discipline within whatever regiment. Not the Nethers. I just kicked my Nether regions. Sorry. So, I'll hold off here for another 20 seconds until the ad's over. But yeah. Sometimes I kind of didn't think about the ads. I went from 1 of 2 to 3 of 4. All right, so the ad breaks over. So as I was saying, something I learned. So something I learned recently that I was not fully aware of. Like I said, it was you know how you read something and you're like, oh yeah, I remember hearing about that or whatever. But that's it. That's kind of where I'm at with this. With the proto commissars, they're called. It's probably not a bad idea, Eris, truth to be told. But yeah, so there were proto commissars during the Great Crusade called discipline masters. Basically the same job, except less about morale and more just discipline. Part of that was they were ensuring that these regiments were, sticking to the principles of the Imperial Truth, which, for those who don't know, the Imperial Truth during the Great Crusade was atheistic, very atheistic, which is kind of why 40k is kind of ironic in that. The Great Crusade was originally launched by the God Emperor, who wasn't called the God Emperor at the time, and it's very atheistic. And there's a fun story that'll go along with that I will talk about in the future. Anyway, so so aside from ensuring everybody was keeping to the Imperial Truth, they were also they were effectively propaganda machines. So they had the remembrancers for that, and the what were their names? Oh, I'm forgetting their names now. They were public speakers that were basically there to spread propaganda. Keep the human spirit at its peak. We're going to take the stars back. Blah 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 blah. Interestingly, discipline masters were usually war veterans from the Imperial Army. Remembrancers, yes. Were those the public speakers too? I thought they might have been. For some reason, I thought there was another name, but I could be wrong. Yes, that is correct. Originally, the God Emperor was atheistic, or at the very least, he told everybody he was not a god, and he even punished one of his sons. Yeah, it is kind of borderline, but as far as traditional religion, he would be considered atheistic. There's a lot of gray area that goes into it, but it's no gods, and the whole purpose of it was to basically keep the existence of the warp secret, or details about the warp secret, as far as daemons and the chaos gods and all this other stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, but that's the gist of it. So the discipline masters were chosen from war veterans from the Imperial Army, which the Imperial Army was basically the Imperial Guard and the Imperial Navy in one organization. Or from other civilized, technologically advanced worlds within the Segmentum Solar. They were. Did he punish his favorite son Horus? Lol, that kid. I know he was an ass. Yeah, it's true. But yeah, so aside from that, yes, yeah, that was his explanation as far as why he did the things he did, and that's actually something that was an interesting choice that he made, and I can see the reasoning behind it to a point. But anyway, again, that's a whole other thing. We'll be talking about everything else here if I'm not careful. But yeah, that is the gist of it. He didn't trust humanity as a whole to be good with the knowledge of the true nature of the warp. Most people, I think, they viewed it as just the means of travel. That's as far as it went, if I recall. Psychers weren't exactly. They existed, but they usually were found and captured by the Sisters of Silence. Even that started during the Great Crusade. Yeah. No, you're fine. You're fine, Eris. It's all good. It's very easy to fall down, lore rabbit holes in 40k. So that's also part of the reason why I have the notes, so I can keep myself on track, or I'll just be like, oh yeah, there's this cool thing. But anyway, so yeah, so they were effectively given the rule of, it is the rabbit hole of rabbit holes. You're right. But the other thing was is so you have these and one of the big differences with the Imperial Army is these more barbaric regiments that they would pick up from these planets that they brought back into the Imperial fold. I mean, we're talking like basically cavemen handed las guns. And so that's why they had these discipline masters to, bring them up to the mark or make them, go where they want them to go. Another interesting thing about them too, which was pretty great, but they had basically the same powers as commissars. Like they could, execute people who ran away. They could punish people who, soldiers who weren't performing their duties like they should have or competently enough, whatever. These guys made sure that they did that or they would be killed. But a cool thing about them is they would use hunting eagle familiars, and familiars are genetically engineered creatures, or they can be robotic, or like an amalgamations, like a cybernetic construct, to hunt down soldiers that weren't doing what they were supposed to. No, go ahead and make snarky comments. It's all for fun. There's no need to worry about that. If anybody gives you grief, I'll yell at them. It's fine. No, okay, yeah, see, now that's off limits. That'll have to ban you for. We're not going to talk about that. Just kidding. Anyway, so to kind of branch off slightly, but it is related, I think it's important as far as their origins. So during the Horus Heresy, God, I feel like that meme where he's like leaning over, he's like, so the Horus Heresy was, well, no, wait, let me back up. Anyway, but so Horus Heresy, Horus, the favored son, rebels against the Emperor. Part of that is half of all the Imperial army joined the Warmaster in this rebellion. Lol, see? Yes, it's true. But yeah, so half the Imperial army. So again, that's what now is called the Imperial Guard and the Imperial Navy. Half of that rebels with the Warmaster, right? At the end of the Horus Heresy, I don't remember if Guilliman specifically. Well, no, I know for sure he split the Imperial Army. That was the big thing. He split them into two different organizations, on top of restructuring the Astartes legions into chapters. And it's basically like a division of power. So if there is a rebelling element within the Imperium, they have potentially less military might at their disposal, is the idea. Because the Horus Heresy was, devastating. Yeah, it's true. Putin, in order to understand the Imperium in the 41st millennium, you need to go back to the Dark Age of humanity. It's true. It really is. Anyway, so yeah, the Horus Heresy ends. Imperial Army is split into... Real Horus Heresy was him making... Oh, I'm joking, I swear. Yes, I know. You're fine, Cat. It's alright. It's alright. I'll only yell at you later in private, even though we never talk outside of stream. And Z would be very upset with me if I did that, so obviously I'm joking. Anyway. Sorry, I need to take a drink there. So, Horus Heresy ends, all this vast restructuring happens. Part of that was the founding of the Commissariat. Like, right as the Great Crusade ended. Right as the Great Crusade ended, they created the Commissariat. And they adopted a lot of the practices that the Discipline Masters had, basically using it as a baseline for their remit and their duties. So what they added on top of that, aside from maintaining discipline, they also were trying to keep an eye out for chaos corruption. So as well as managing morale and just like the general well-being of the regiment they were assigned to, basically to keep them fighting as efficiently and as hard as they needed for the Imperial Guard. But that was the big addition to their duties, was keeping an eye out for chaos corruption. That's the big difference between the Discipline Masters and the Commissariat, on top of what's the word I'm thinking of? Regulating how they operate. Because Discipline Masters were basically, it was very open to interpretation to a point where it's just like, here are the principles of the Imperial Truth, whatever, have fun, don't care. With the Commissariat, there's an actual standard. There we go. That's the word I was trying to think of. There's a standard of how they're trained, how they operate, blah, 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 blah. So, after the end of the Horus Heresy, there was this period of time called the Great Scouring, and that's basically where the now reformed Imperial military went about purging the rest of the Imperium from of chaos. So they were initially Grumman standards. So they were attached to every Imperial Guard regiment, and they were originally tasked with cleaning out chaos splinter sleeper cells. Like we're taught, and this isn't like small amounts, like handfuls of people here and there. No, they executed millions of people, because they were trained as soldiers, and commanders and that sort of thing. So they're not super great at like the more subtle investigative stuff. Like there is some of that there, but most of the time they're there to be war leaders, or war propagandists, whatever you want to call them. Kind of both, actually. But that's why they were there. And so up until the Inquisition was made. Once the Inquisition was made, all that was handed over to them. Although the Commissariat still holds those duties, they still have to keep an eye out for chaos corruption. But now, instead of oh hey, there's a pocket of chaos corruption in the city. Okay, everybody in the cities or the city block or like this half of the city is going to be executed because there's this chaos corruption. Now, Inquisitors will still do that sometimes, depending on how bad things get. But usually they're a little more circumspect than that. Usually they're not executing entire cities. Again, it depends on the Inquisitor and it depends on what it is. But generally speaking. But yeah, during this time, millions of people were executed during the Great Scouring. They, hunted the traitor legions to one end of the from one end of the galaxy to the other. That's why they were all shoved back into the mean hole, most of them anyway, the Eye of Terror. Yeah, city block, Hive City, planet. Yeah. Exterminatus is a thing, and it is used, although not quite as often as the meme is, but more often than you would think at the same time. It's all the same. Yeah, it is. Well, it depends. If it's the Ordo Malleus, then to them, yes. If there's daemons showing up, then they're gonna probably, bare minimum, glass the city. Might glass the planet just to be safe. Let's see. So yeah, so that's basically that is the origin of the Commissariat, and the Discipline Masters. That was something that like I said, I knew existed tangentially. Actually, here's some art of one that's about to pop up. Guy with the eagle on his shoulder. I had heard of them. I couldn't recall what they were specifically until I was double checking my information, because most of this stuff comes from my memory, but I do will compare wiki for things that I don't have, or I'll go check my books for things that I do have. And anything in the wiki, I try to check the source and make sure that whatever's on there is accurate, because I just don't trust them all the way. Anyway. So, yeah. Alright. So yeah, that was their origin, and the Discipline Masters was not something I had really had a lot of knowledge on. And also, I had thought I was right, but it was, yeah. I wasn't quite aware that the Commissariat started right at the end of the Great Crusade. Like, that was also something I wasn't fully aware of, so that was kind of cool. I played a scum from a hive world. I got saved by Inquisitor before the planet was glassed due to Cornite infiltration. Ask Z about Cyrene. Oh, nice. That's awesome. Was that Dark Heresy or something else? I played a little bit of Dark Heresy and Road Trader, and haven't played Deathwatch. I also have Wrath and Glory that I've looked at, but I haven't played that yet. Yeah, Dark Heresy. Dark Heresy is pretty fun. And the great thing about Dark Heresy is you can, in theory, you can take a character from Dark Heresy into Rogue Trader, and then from Rogue Trader to Deathwatch, assuming they can survive that long. But you can do it in theory. Pneumatic hammer in my random roll. Oh, that's cool. That's fantastic. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so that was their origin. So now I'm going to talk about their, how they select their recruits, how they train them, and a little bit more on the also power armor. He was angry. Well, power armor is pretty awesome. I mean, in many ways. It's definitely helpful if you're a melee build, because you get all that nice strength bonus. But yeah, so we're going to talk about their, like I said, selection, training, a little bit more about the Officio Prefectus. Anyway. So yeah, Commissar cadets, they're chosen at when the I'm here. It was amazing. I miss it. Someday I might be tempted to try and run another Dark Heresy game. We'll see. I make no promises. Or that I would even... Anyway. We'll see. We'll see what I decide on that at some point. Because I do have a hankering, but at the same time, it's like I would like to play. So, anyway. So yeah, Commissar cadets, the way that they're chosen is, basically everybody from, like, any orphans left over from like Imperial Guard officers that have died, or Imperial Guard troopers that have distinguished themselves in some way. They always die. Oh, that's awesome. Played a Dark Heresy game playing as a Mordian Iron Guard cadet. That's great. See, the Mordians I need to look into more. I've caught them here in bits and pieces. I have a general idea of how they operate, but I need to look into them more. Anyway, so these orphans, what happens is, and again, they have to have like a certain amount of, like, their parents had to have done something to get sent to this place called the Schola Progenium, which is basically like a state-funded, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, oh, can't think of it. It's like a state-funded, like, specialist school, and they train the Commissars, stormtroopers, which are like elite soldiers. They train some administratum clerks and what's the word? What am I thinking of? Oh, and the Adeptus Arbites, which are like space cops. And also, the Adeptus Sororitas will pick up recruits sent to the Schola Progenium. That's where they get, I don't want to say all, but I know that's where they get a lot of their recruits for the Adeptus Sororitas, aka the Sisters of Battle. So yeah, so it's like a top-end, hyper-specialized, like it's the best education that you can get in the Imperium, basically. With it though comes, mandatory military service in most cases. And during that, actually, when you're sent into the School of Progenium, you do you go through aptitude tests. They give you like basic general education, and then somewhere in that time frame, they send you through selection. And so when selection comes up, that's when they say, okay, we think you're good at being you have the potential to be a commissar. So now you're a commissar cadet or a stormtrooper, or again, if you're female, a sister of battle, so on and so forth. So yeah. Hey, Eris, nice. You're a subscriber now. You don't have to worry about the ad breaks anymore. Thank you for subscribing, man. I'm still just like flabbergasted at all that. That's fantastic, man. I can't thank you enough. Truly. I'm a real boy now. You are. Let's see here. But yeah, so the orphans from the enlisted, that's more on the rare side. It's most often these are children of officers, but it does happen with frontline troopers like the grunts. It's just more rare. But the big thing is that they are similar to the discipline masters. They're trained to be like strictly adherent to the Imperial Creed. So this is, after the heresy, the Imperium views the God Emperor as a god. Well, the Emperor as the God Emperor. And the Imperial Creed is basically their Bible, effectively. Well, their Bible is the Vactitio Divinitatis. And fun fact about that, it was written by Lorgar. Haha. Anyway, so with Commissar cadets, their training is extremely demanding, obviously, and it is designed to filter out the weak. Yes, we don't talk about that. We don't. It's not allowed. And it's designed to get rid of the weak as quickly as possible. So you're only getting the best of these commissars. The training, as you would expect, covers like military exercises, so tactics and strategy, weapons proficiency. So generally, they're trained on a variety of things, actually, from las pistols to the full las gun, bolters, bolt pistols, cruise serve weapons, that sort of thing. So they just have like a general. Anything that's in the standard Imperial arsenal they can probably use, and probably even use some things that's not standard, like Volkite weaponry. Although those are few and far between. But generally speaking, anything in the Imperial arsenal as far as an infantry weapon, they know how to use. At least to some degree. They might not know the super ins and outs of all the maintenance side, that's Mechanicus anyway, but as far as like operating it, heavy bolter, las cannon, whatever, they can use it. Then there's their hand-to-hand combat training, and those guys usually, or at least Commander Cruiser version, exactly, yeah. So then hand-to-hand combat training, and that's where their main or their most used melee weapon is a chainsword. That's the stereotypical commissar weapon, or melee weapon is a chainsword. We'll get into their war gear here a little bit more in a bit, but hand-to-hand combat training, religious studies, and a big part of that is making sure that they're totally dedicated to an aftercane. Yeah. In aftercane. So let's see. Oh, yes. So they're trained to be fully dedicated to their duty as commissars. And the big thing of that is basically the ability to hand out the Emperor's justice without hesitation or remorse. Like, instantaneously, as soon as there's enough justification for it, they can give the Emperor's Justice. Well, what is the Emperor's Justice? Usually it's a bolter to the brain. Or a last shot to the brain, whatever they're happening to use at the time. But the point is it's execution, summary execution. And they're trained to be drilled into it that there is zero hesitation between when they make the decision that, yep, this guy needs to be executed, and the time they pull the trigger. Zero. Done. He's blasted in the face. To the point of where, and even in the Kane books it's mentioned, they will bring in prisoners who are set for execution anyway, but they will bring prisoners to the Schola Progenium for these Commissar cadets to practice execution. Like, and so you have to realize, like, these are kids. Like, these are kids that are blowing somebody's brains out right in front of them. Like, they're standing there, putting the barrel of the gun to this dude's head and pulling the trigger. At, like, 12... I don't think they're 10. I think they're teenagers. I think they have to be at least... Well, actually, I'm not really sure about that. I'm not sure how old they are. I know, but they're in... I want to say 10 to 14. Well, actually, there's a few different ways their training goes down, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, they're kids, young kids, killing these people, and so that's part of their training. And again, that's to facilitate, so when they're in the field and they need to put down a trooper, there's no hesitation. It's boom, he's done, he's dead. Move on. So actually, moving on to their training. So there's a few different ways that I've heard their training described. Well, two specifically. The way Kane describes his training is different from what I had heard before, and how he trains his cadets is a bit different as well. But I think I don't really know what to chalk that up to. It could be that different regions handle things differently based on demand, and so they have to kind of do things a little more quickly to get more Commissars in the field, because they just can't... Ad break in 19 seconds, by the way. Because they can't keep up with the demand for the Imperial Guard, what's actually needed on the front lines. Excuse me. Yeah, so we'll continue on here after the ad break. Alright. At least I think it's starting. I don't know. Yeah, it should be running now. Very shortly. It's a Kane focus thing versus, yeah, quote-unquote reality for the inverse. It's true. Yeah, it's true. Well, so my thought is with that is that it's, like I said, it's based off of need. I mean, I guess they're needed a ton across the Imperium, but anyway, I'm going to go through the two different methods that I've seen, Kane's, and then what I think is most likely the most common. I think where Kane is at is yeah. Anyway, so oh, there goes the ad. Goodness gracious. Sorry, I had a little bit of coughing fit there. I had to take a drink. Whew. Oh, wait. No, I know what the problem is. One sec. I will be right back. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, Oh, apparently you can develop asthma in your 30s. And I forgot to. I have an inhaler I have to do every 12 hours, and I forgot to do it. But I did it now, so I'll be fine. Nothing life-threatening. Anyway, so as I was saying, there's two methods of cadets moving from, cadet to full commissar, and so the one that I think is like the quote-unquote actual method is. So basically, what happens is after they hit a certain age, and the School of Virginium, has decided that they've shown enough competence, they'll send them to an Imperial Guard regiment, and usually they're tutored by a veteran commissar. Sometimes it's a regiment's commanding officer. I think that's. I don't know exactly how regularly that happens. I think most often it's a veteran commissar, although. No, Gaunt was trained by a general commissar, wasn't he? Yeah. Anyway. So they get sent to a frontline regiment to be trained by a veteran commissar most often. And depending on how many are sent to this regiment, so if there's a lot of cadets that get sent to the single regiment, say 10 to 20, or squad size. Squad size in the Imperial Army, Imperial Guard is 10 usually. Command squads, I think, are half that size, 5 if I recall. Anyway, so there's squads of 10. And they're armed with las guns like regular troopers, and they're excuse me. Anyway, so regimental commanders, like whatever regiments they're sent to, are usually pretty excited to have these commissar cadets because they're trained like elite soldiers. They're trained to be incredibly loyal, and strictly focused on, sticking to regulation, tactical knowledge, strategic knowledge, that sort of thing. So it's like basically getting a squad of elite troops. So they really appreciate these kids. I mean, shit, they're kids showing up on the battlefield. The other thing is, they can be executed. They embellish shit, yeah. They do, but still. But they are also can be summarily executed if they falter or retreat at all. So they have a ton of extra motivation to be this way, aside from their training. Like, they can be just like any other trooper. If their tutor decides that they're not doing well enough or are cowards, will execute them on the spot. Now, when they go from, in this particular method, when they go from cadet to full commissar, is totally dependent on whoever their tutor is. And so it can take a few years. They are also expendable. That's true, yeah. They don't have an actual slot in the regiment's organization. They're not responsible for them, so they don't have to give a shit about them. Really. Yeah, so they're basically, up until their tutor decides they are worthy of being, bumped up to full commissar, they stay a cadet, and that can take whatever amount of time that their tutor decides. Basically, like, season until your ancestors tell you to stop kind of deal, except with military training. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yarrick, actually, that was how he was trained, but it was him and one other cadet that trained together. I'm forgetting the name of his trainer right now, or his tutor right now. I might remember in a bit. Anyway, but that whole process, that seems to be the standard set by the commissariat. So the other method, and it's only ever brought up in the Kane books, is similar to like a regular school, to where, although they're not very specific on when, it still sounds like it's like whenever, they feel you're ready for it. But the training is basically all the same. There's still, the execution and torture training, like all that stuff. But the difference is your tutor at the Schola Progenium, which again in this case is specific example, Commissar Kane, hero of the Imperium, who will be talked about at length here in a bit. That's actually my second to last section, is where I go through my favorite Commissars. Anyway, so with Kane, he himself, the way he graduated and how he graduated his cadets, although, is when his Commissar instructor at the Schola decided he was ready. And so instead of, serving intermittently with another regiment and then being a Commissar, they were sent out to a regiment as a full-blown Commissar. And that seems to be the case with his cadets. Spoiler alert, Kane ends up getting some cadets, in case anybody wasn't aware of that. Yeah, so that's basically when, that's the other method, that's the Kane method, is it's like a high school, you graduate, except in this case you finish your training, you're getting sent to, potentially be executing people, and you're like maybe 17 or 18 years old. Part of that is, they're given, at the time of their graduation, and this is in both cases, they're given their Scarlet Sash and their either a bolt pistol or a las pistol, depending on what they chose, and a chainsword. Those are their two things, aside from their badass uniform, that they get when they graduate. Anyway, so moving on from their training, we're going to go into a little bit deeper dive into their duties and their overall command structure, because they do have a command structure, but it's a bit different than the Imperial Guard. There's no hard and fast ranks beyond Cadet and Commissar. There is a Lord Commissar rank, but this isn't like, it isn't an official thing. It's based off of how long you've served and how many commendations you have, and you can become a Lord Commissar. They're not exactly explicit on how this quote-unquote promotion is made. It's basically like everybody's just like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. He's calling himself a Lord Commissar. Yeah, he should be. Maybe there's more to it that I'm just not quite remembering. But I didn't find anything that really expanded on that. It was just kind of like, you've been there long enough, you've lived through all this shit. All right, cool. You're Lord Commissar now. And so they are, their opinion is weighed higher than a regular Commissar, to the point of where they can give orders to other Commissars. Because typically that's not the case. When, to a point, if there's a dispute in orders, like say, Commissar A says, charge the front line, Commissar B is like, nah, screw that, let's do a flanking maneuver. The way that dispute is settled is based off of length of service and commendations. So the longer the Commissar has served, or the more commendations, or it's a combination of both, determines who is correct in that situation, or whose opinion is going to be the one that is followed. So they're self-policing, which is kind of interesting. Now, anyway, so there's Commissar Cadet, Commissar, Lord Commissar. Those are the three, bog standard Commissar ranks, essentially. Now, that being said, there are outlier ranks. There's, because the way a Commissar works is they are supposed to be outside of the chain of command of the Imperial Guard. That's like a big component of how they operate, is that nobody in the Imperial Guard can say, can punish them. They can complain to the Commissariat, and if the Commissariat decides that, yes, they did something wrong, then they will do something about it. But unless it's like blatant, like obviously if a commissar's, just murdering everybody for no reason because he snapped, then that's a whole other thing. But like a dispute over tactics, or like a decision made in the field, like who a commissar executes, Imperial Guard, the entire Imperial Guard rank structure can't do anything about it besides complain to the commissariat. And that's all the way up to a Warmaster or a Lord General. The only time that's different is keep in mind that that's Imperial Guard or Imperial Navy, because commissars are also attached to the Imperial Navy. They're just not talked about as much. Whew. Was talking a lot there. I was talking fast. Oh boy. Yeah. That's within the quote-unquote Imperial military. What that means, effectively, is Sisters of Battle, Mechanicus, Space Marines, obviously, and the Inquisition as a whole are completely outside of their remit. So, and I mean, obviously, an Inquisitor can do basically anything, for the most part. Those are the only ones that you're really going to see who can do something immediately about a commissar's decision. Anyway, so there's kind of these outlier commissar ranks that do exist. One of them is a junior commissar, it's weird because they are almost kind of a mix, like an in-between point between a cadet and a full commissar. I'm not quite sure why they have the junior commissar rank. I think it's because they give them, like they're considered, or they're used as far as like to do more investigatory things, like investigate claims made by other troopers, or excuse me, search for chaos, taint, that sort of thing. And basically, like, they're also, it's almost kind of like having a regimental commissar within a regiment. So it's like you have your regular commissar attached to a regiment, and then you'll have this junior commissar who's got the same duties up until summary execution. They can't do that unless they talk to their regimental commissar. They can't execute anybody, usually. But they're basically given all other powers of a full commissar and all other duties for like a smaller chunk of the regiment, so like a squad or a platoon or a company, as kind of like an in-between step between cadet and junior. So anyway, yeah, like I said, big thing is that commissars are completely outside of the chain of command, and what that also means is that they are never assigned to command a regiment permanently. And you're like, well, wait, that doesn't make any sense. They have to execute officers in the field. Doesn't that mean they take over for that regiment if they execute the officer? The answer is yes. Now, the distinction is once that action is over, like once there is time for another commanding officer to be chosen, the commissar steps aside and goes back to his normal role of being an advisor. That's the norm. That's how it goes in 99% of cases. However, there are commissars that are given command ranks within the Imperial Guard. So they are both. They're a Imperial Guard officer and a commissar at the same time, which is weird. It doesn't happen very often. And so the big name that everyone hears is Colonel Commissar Abraham Gaunt of the Tanith First and Only. He's the one a lot of people know about. He's like, when you talk about a commissar of the permanent command rank, you're going to be talking about Gaunt first and foremost, because he is the unique case that is based off of, or he's the one the unique case that's talked about the most. That being said, there are other similar command ranks of Commissar. So there's Commissar captains, which I haven't seen a ton of. I think they're like given command of a platoon instead of a regiment, or a company. No, excuse me, it'd be a company. Pardon. They'd be given command of a company within a regiment instead of a full regiment. Which, yeah. Then beyond that is a Commissar General, which is basically like the tippy top commissar of a crusade. Say there's this huge offensive that the Imperium is launching, which they call crusades. And at the very top you'll have like a Lord General or a Warmaster, depending on how large it is. So the Commissar General is the commissar attached at that very top level, and it's not quite the same as a command rank. Like they can't specifically they can't take permanent command of the entire crusade instead of a War Master or Lord General. But they are the senior representative of the commissariat for that particular campaign or crusade, and so they're tippy top of that pyramid. So an example of that is the only one that I've seen Commissar General wise is Lady Commissar General Victoria Balshin. She was assigned to the 5th Army Command Staff during the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, and she was assigned to Lord General Barthol van Voits. I'm going to butcher that name, I apologize. Assigned to his staff. And she was there's a whole thing that goes with that, but I don't want to spoil a lot of what these guys do. There's parts where I talk about them a lot. I do try to stay away from a lot of spoilers because I would really like people to go out and read these books. They're great books. But I hope to give you enough of a teaser to those of you who haven't read them to, maybe give them a consideration. They're very good. Anyway. But yeah, so next is, let's see here. Oh, I lost my place. Ah, yes, okay, I just finished talking about command ranks. Right. So yeah, like I said earlier, the main duty of a commissar is to maintain, purity, which means, free of chaos, corruption, and the morale of a regiment he or she is assigned to. And yes, there are female commissars, just not very many of them. And that's because while there are mixed gender units within the Imperial Guard, they are mainly single sex, mainly male, and if I recall right, it's only 10% of the entire Imperial Guard is female. 90% of it is male. And that's not because of any sort of restrictions, because the Imperium just doesn't care. You can hold the las rifle, you're fine. And this is also not that's not the same across the board. So, Cadia, for example, they use everybody. Everybody is a fucking soldier. They don't care. And there's other worlds that are like that as well, where it doesn't matter what your gender is, you're going in the Imperial Guard. But looking at the Imperium as a whole, only 10% of the Imperial Guard is female. Now again, this is specifically the Imperial Guard. That's not the Navy. That's not the Inquisition or whatever. This is just the Imperial Guard specifically. So yeah, it's only 10% of them. So female commissars, I think it's about the same. Maybe a little less. I'm not 100%. But at the very least, you want to have female commissars assigned to single-sex female units. Kind of makes sense. Amberly Vale actually makes a great joke that, they wouldn't take orders from a mere man anyway, so you have to have female commissars. But yeah, so, they have to uphold this purity and morale of a regiment by any means necessary. And most of the time, in the face of any foe, from a Chaos Cultist to a fucking Tyrannid Swarm to a phalanx of Necron Warriors, like, their Commissar's main task is to make sure that those troopers keep fighting no matter what it is they're trying to fight. So, it's a freaking Carnifex, and you got, 50 guys with las rifles. They're probably not going to kill that Carnifex, most likely. Or they're going to have a really hard time, and most of them are going to die in the process. And again, there's different circumstances that go into it. But basically, they are, most of the time, their stereotypical method of operating is to scare the troopers more than whatever it is they're trying to kill. They are to be more intimidating than, the Carnifex that's going to eat them for breakfast kind of deal. Now, Summary Execution, that's the most extreme, so that's the one that gets the most recognition. And again, if you're in an active, fight, basically, if they're going to deal with you, they're going to execute you. There's some other things that'll come from that too, but generally speaking. Excuse me. Now, what's talked about less is things that occur off the battlefield, like when they're in garrison. They still are in charge of all punishment, not just cowardice on the battlefield, but they check your barracks, and your barracks looks like shit. Okay, whatever the punishment is for that. Like, for example, your uniform is not what it should be. It's not regulation for whatever reason. Alright, that's flogging. Like, the punishments are usually pretty extreme, or they can be, depending on, and it depends on the Commissar and how they want to operate, but generally speaking, they are big assholes. So, that's why, that's why Commissars have the reputation they do. That's what all these Imperial Guard troopers and all these Imperial Navy sailors are told, is Commissars will shoot you if they have a reason to. And it can be, it's basically any reason. It's not quite the case, but that's, what they're told. So, taking a drink. Alright. So, that's what they're told. That's the reputation that they have, in the entire Imperial Guard, like, top to bottom. And the other reason for that is, like I said at the very beginning, they can execute anybody within the Imperial Guard chain of command. All the way from a, frontline ground pounder trooper to a planetary governor. And you're like, well, what do you mean a planetary governor? Well, much like the President of the United States, planetary governors are considered the commander-in-chief of all PDF forces on the planet. PDF stands for Planetary Defense Force. They're basically exactly what they sound like. They are, they call them a militia, but they're the National Guard of the planet. They don't travel anywhere else. They live on the planet. Their training is usually meh. Like, they're basically designed to, clog up the meat grinder until the Imperial Guard can show up, to put it bluntly. But the PDF is considered to be a part of the Imperial Guard. So, a Commissar has just as much jurisdiction over the PDF as they do the Imperial Guard. Now, whereas Commissars are assigned per regiment and, up different chunks of command, but usually it's, you have a Commissar at the regimental level, and then the next step above that, and the next step above that, blah, 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 blah. But in the case of the PDF, usually you'll have a Commissar that's assigned to, like, a subsector. He or she is tasked with maintaining discipline and morale for billions of soldiers, potentially, by themselves. you have one guy who has to hand out punishment for millions and millions of soldiers that probably don't even, most of the time, don't even know they exist because they never see them, which makes sense. If you're bouncing between worlds all the time, they might see you once every couple of decades, or less than that, depending on the size of the subsector. Yeah. So anyway, since the planetary governor is considered the commander-in-chief of the PDF, that means a commissar can execute a planetary governor with enough evidence. So it can't be just because they don't like him. There has to be a reason. While they might not get punished immediately, they will be punished by the commissariat if there's not enough, if there's not enough precedent or evidence or whatever to do this execution. And then usually what comes with that is you'll get sent to a penal legion, and that's a whole other nightmare that we can talk about some other time. But yeah, it's not good. But yeah. So, like I said, most commissars operate under the method of being scary, fear, making these troopers be more afraid of the commissar than whatever it is they're fighting. That's the stereotype. Now, there are notable, successful examples of commissars that go the opposite direction, or not quite as hardline. And I'll talk a little bit more into that, but Kane has his own method, and then Ibram Gaunt's a whole other thing. And then you have Yerrick, which is, your basic, your stereotypical commissar, but he's just a pure badass. You can't. Nobody would try to argue with Yerrick because he just has this huge, legend around him, and I'll go into him quite a bit here. He's probably, I don't know if I could choose my favorite out of all of them, but Yerrick was my favorite 40k character for a long time. So I'll be gushing about him a bit more later. Anyway, so another one of their duties is, so after they take a planet back from alien occupation, they'll set up propaganda stations. Oh man, the back of my throat's itching. But they'll set up these propaganda stations where, Imperial citizens that weren't initially, executed or whatever, but these Imperial citizens will be able to file anonymous reports to the commissariat for potential traitors, xenosympathizers, and that sort of thing. And they're, usually rounded up and shot. Because they're traitors to humanity, and kind of the same with, if they take a planet back from chaos, they do the same thing until the Inquisition shows up if they're not present. Usually when they take back a planet that's been taken by chaos, there's an Inquisitor or two on hand for this specific purpose. But if for some reason there's not an Inquisitor immediately available, then the Commissar will basically do the same except for Chaos Taint up until the Inquisition shows up. But again, they're not really built for that. They're built for, like I said, managing troops and killing large swathes of the enemy and that sort of thing. They're not built to be specifically clandestine, really. That's the word I'm looking for. They don't operate in a clandestine fashion. That's not how they're trained. However, all commissars, what they have in common, one of the many things they have in common, is they're all trained to be fantastic orators. They can give these great speeches that are designed to, obviously boost morale, get these troops to fight better, fight harder. Now, what that means on top of that, and why, commissars are trained to be these fantastic warriors and soldiers, um, is because they are expected to be on the front lines saying, giving these speeches or giving, prayers to the emperor or, whatever. They're there to lead by example for these troopers to a point. So that's why these guys and gals are trained in the way that they are, because they are going to be up in the shit often. Aside from that, they also have to kind of worry about, if whatever they're fighting is too scary, the troopers are like, well, F that. They know that the first thing that they have to do is get rid of their commissar before they can run away. So, yeah, that can be a problem. But kind of a fun side fact is, so commissars are, they do give prayers to the emperor, these morale boosting speeches, but they'll have kind of friendly rivalries with these the battlefield preachers sent there by the ecclesiarchy in some cases. So they'll try to outdo each other with their speeches. They'll do crazier and crazier feats of battle to motivate their troops, and it's a friendly rivalry. Kind of a like, ha, I got that headshot. Now you gotta now you suck. And then the commissar is like, oh, I did this, and so on and so forth. Another thing too is that they're just kind of, and again, it depends on how heavy-handed they want to get into it. But for longer campaigns, they are also expected to create propaganda pieces, flyers, picked feeds, vox casts of different things to boost morale over a longer period of time. So that's another kind of thing that they do that's not talked about as much. But the commissariat does have a lot of propaganda pushes, like longer terms, more what I would say is passive propaganda, where it's, like I said, flyers, voxcasts, aka radio broadcasts, picked feeds, TV feeds, so on and so forth, depending on where they are and what the situation is. So yeah. Yes, so to a point, yes, they are called political officers, and they quite literally embody that a lot. That is their thing is to be a political officer. So they can get involved in politics to a point. And actually, this happens to Kane a lot, and Gaunt a lot too, but more so within the Imperial power structure, less the civilian side of things. He does a little bit, but mostly it's within the Imperial Guard itself, the military structure. Kane is he's way more into the civilian side of things, as far as diplomacy and politics and that sort of thing. But anyway, like I said, I'll get to him. So yeah, that's pretty much it as far as they're they're not. I mean, I could go on about their duties and stuff, but that's most of it is. Oh, actually, no, I lied. There's one more. So another thing that they're responsible for is any sanctioned psychers that are attached to their regiment or whatever command structure they're a part of. Part of their duty is to keep an eye on these psychers, and they are trained to spot signs of warp taint or demonic possession. And they're trained to spot it early, because if a psyker is going to become a daemon host, you want to do it. You want to get rid of them as soon as is possible, because the longer that a daemon has to possess a psyker, the worse it gets, to put it simply. So they are trained to spot it and to execute it as soon as they think it. As soon as they think that there's even the slightest hint of it, they will execute these psychers. Now, this has led to, quote-unquote innocent psychers being executed. But the commissariat doesn't care. They would much prefer that you execute a potentially innocent psyker instead of having a full-blown daemon host. Because a daemon host, and depending on the daemon that possesses this psyker, even minor daemons can just absolutely wreck shit. Like, you know, depending on how, and it gets worse the longer that they're on the material plane. Or the materium. They're in the materium, it just gets worse because as they're killing people, they're devouring their souls, which makes them stronger. And so the more souls they have, and the more that they exist in the materium, the stronger they become. Now, without a daemon host, daemons will fade fairly quickly, depending on the number, and this is variable. And we can talk. I might do like just an overall stream about the work, because there's a lot that can be said about that. But yeah, so that's another thing too, is that they are tasked with keeping the psychers in check, making sure that they're not gonna, their heads aren't gonna split open and a bloodthirster's gonna pop out. So yeah, moving on from that, we can talk about their sick ass gear. I absolutely love the Commissar uniforms. So they have the big ass black greatcoat with red and gold epaulets. So those are the things around their shoulders that have the little tassel-y looking things. The coats also has like a red lighting along the inside of the collar and the cuffs, and then their iconic peaked officer's cap. Also black with red lining, and usually they'll have like an aquila, so that's like the double-headed eagle, a skull motif, so it's just like a death's head, like a skull, or a mix of both, and it just depends. But those are the usual. Then they'll have a black undercoat with like red or gold kind of finery to make it look nice. Black combat boots, and then the piece de resistance black jack boots to round it all out. So they make nice loud stomping noises when they walk by. So on top of that, depending on what duties they're assigned to at the moment, you'll also see them with armor. Most of the time when you see it, you see them in like the art pieces that have been going by, and you'll see some of them with armor on, but a lot of them you see them just have coats. But they will have armor. Most of the time it's just, it's flak armor, the same that the regular troopers wear. There are some, so there's a Krieg Commissar that flashes by, and I think the art of Commissar Rain has like looks like a medieval breastplate. They'll wear that too. And then again, like I said, some of them will have carapace, which is like, if I recall, it's like a thinner ceramite composite. So it's better. Anyway, it's more gooder. And they'll usually have some sort of commendations on them, or the same motifs that their caps have. So there's lots of style there, and I love their outfits. I would do things for a like well-made Commissar greatcoat. I would lose my absolute shit. Well, the greatcoat and the hat; those are the two big ones. If I could get a well-made Commissar coat and peaked cap, I would lose my effing mind. Anyway, so they will also wear armor. And they'll carry devotional items, so like some Imperial Cult Gospel, war manuals. They'll have, aquillas that they'll wear around their necks, similar to like a crucifix, kind of a deal. So the stereotypical loadout that you'll see of a Commissar is, of course, the chainsword and the bolt pistol. Those are the two like stereotypical weapons that you see with a Commissar. But they're not restricted to those weapons. Those are just the ones that they're issued with. So like I said, a while back they're given either a bolt pistol or a las pistol and a chainsword. However, they do have access to basically the entirety of the Imperial Guard armory. So, like for example, Commissar Kane, he uses a las pistol instead of a bolt pistol. Although that is more common than is played off, because you will see, like I said, most of the time they have bolt pistols. It's because they're loud, they're intimidating, they do an F ton of damage against a variety of targets. But keeping them with ammo can be a problem, and so that's why las pistols are used more often, or more often than you would think. And yeah, because you can do some crazy stuff with las pistols as far as or las weaponry's energy cells. Like, you can do what's called a I think it's called a hot load. They basically take the power cell and they will just throw it in fire, like into a bonfire, and it will charge the cell. They can only do it a couple of times or a few times because it does degrade the cell. But yeah, that's part of it, is that you have a variety of ways that you could recharge energy cells. Whereas with a bolt pistol, once you're out of, bolt rounds, that's it. It's a paperweight. So that's part of the reason why you'll see las pistols a lot. But so aside from whatever they're given when they're promoted, you can still see there's still a lot more gear that you'll see them equipped with, and it depends on what regiments they're attached to, what war zones they've been to, what the availability of weaponry is. Because in theory, they can go to any Imperial Guard armory and take whatever they want out of it for themselves. They just can't. But they can also be gifted weapons. Like Gaunt was given a power sword, an ancient power sword. But yeah, well, we'll leave that for the books. But anyway, the point is that they can and do use a wide range of gear. Like I already mentioned, power weapons. Most of the time you'll see swords and sabers or whatever. Though occasionally you see axes and power fists, which are like exactly what they sound like. It's a big fist to punch things with. Though those are a bit more rare. Most of the time, power fists you'll see on Space Marines, but there are baseline humans that will use power fists. They're a lot more rare than the Space Marine ones. You'll also see Commissars with plasma pistols. Again, that's more on the rare side, but you will see them. Though they're not as favored because plasma weaponry in 40k is temperamental, we'll say. And at the very least, they can overheat and be, unusable unless they want it to blow up in their face, at crucial moments. So it's usually like a I don't want to say it's a backup, but it's like a specialty, like an extra sidearm. So they'll normally have not all the time, but normally they'll have like say a bolt pistol, and then they'll have this plasma pistol for, things that need to be hit with something bigger to die. Really. So yeah. So the point is that you'll see a variety of weaponry among Commissars. Not just their stereotypical bolt pistol and chainsword. I think I've even seen some Commissars with Volkite pistols, which are like these ancient energy weapons, but I'm not quite sure if that's 100% true. I can't recall where I've seen it, so take that with a grain of salt. But the plasma pistols and power weaponry, for sure. That is a thing that does happen. So yeah, that's their war gear in kind of a nutshell. Well, not really a nutshell. I don't know about that, but a while. So now what I'm going to talk about is their kind of their Commissars like style of leadership. And there's 3 different types that I've seen. So the first one I'm going to talk about is like the stereotypical one. So that's the one that is known for executing troopers at the drop of a hat. Like that's the one where they are utterly ruthless. They're to be feared at all times. They follow regulations like to the letter. They will execute troopers in the field if they see any sort of lagging zeal, any even a hint of cowardice, and they will execute these guys. Now the problem is, it is an effective method of operating. It does work. The problem is, though, is it creates a lot of resentment from the troopers to the commissar. And while you're like, well, why does that matter? Well, friendly fire accidents happen that weren't exactly accidents or friendly. But, if you're a dick of a commissar, chances are you're probably a dick to the CO, who's not going to care much that you were shot in the back half a dozen times. So, they do build up a lot of resentment. So it's kind of funny that it's the common method of operating. Now, there are varying degrees of it. It's not correct to say that they, like all the ones that follow this school of thought are all that ruthless. Obviously, there's always going to be degrees that different people operate at. But generally speaking, this can create a lot of resentment from these troopers. On top of that, what that also means is, so say you're a commissar, you're the one that wants to be scarier than whatever it is you're forcing these troopers to kill. That only works up to a point. You're just a person, right? So okay, now this is a say a company of troopers or whatever, and you're trying to get them to charge into a formation of like Tyranids, and there's Carnifexes, which are these giant, like, mean as fuck Tyranids, or like a Swarm Lord, or whatever, like these horrifying monsters that are just butchering Imperial Guard troopers left and right. It's just huge swathes of troopers just getting killed by these things. Well, I don't care how scary of a commissar you are, you're going to be more afraid of that monster that's just like literally eating your buddies for breakfast. So, as a whole, your entire formation, whatever size is like, okay, fuck this, we're going to retreat. Well, who do you think is going to be the first one that they're going to kill? Like at this point, the commissar's pushing them to keep fighting whatever this horrifying thing is, and they're like, fuck that, I want to live. As like a collective. Well, the first one who's going to be shot is the commissar. They're going to kill that commissar because, one, he's going to be killing them first for running away. So to get away from whatever's trying to kill them, they're going to kill the commissar. Now that's worst case scenario. However, like I said, friendly fire quote unquote accidents happen. It can be just a regular engagement. Oh, we thought he was blah, 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 and you could have shot him point blank, but if you're somebody who's hated by the troopers, no one's going to complain. No one's going to care. Now, that's the most common. Now, there is a flip side to that, and that's what I call it the Kane type, because Kane's really the only one who does it. In the way that he does. So, the way that Kane operates is he wants to establish a culture of mutual respect between himself and every member of whatever regiment he's attached to. Which means he's a lot more loose with regulations. He is a lot less ruthless. His motto that he says a few different times is every trooper lost is a victory for the enemies of the Emperor. So he doesn't, he won't throw the lives away of troopers for, in suicidal ways. He tries to, that's the other thing about the other types of commissars, is losses mean nothing to them. They don't care. They will just shove people into the meat grinder until whatever it is they're trying to kill is dead, or whatever. Whatever objective they're trying to take is taken. losses are just a number. Kane's the opposite of that. He wants to limit losses as much as possible. And he wants to not be friends, because commissars, it doesn't matter how nice of a commissar you are. If you want to have any authority anyway, you're not going to make friends with the troopers. But you can mutually respect each other. That's what Kane prefers to do. And I don't want to say he's nice, but he is a lot lighter. He is what I would consider the complete opposite end of the spectrum from the stereotypical commissar. So, like I said, he will bend the regulations as much as he can. He's, manipulates to, in certain situations. So, one thing that happens to him is a trooper kills a Tyranid that's trying to eat him, and so he gives this attitude of he gives this particular trooper a break because he saved his life, when in actuality he's not. He's punishing him the same as everybody else, but he makes him think that he's not. And so in so doing, he subtly encourages the rest of the troopers in the regiment, oh shit, if I save the commissar, or if I have an opportunity to save the commissar, I will, be in his favor, or he'll owe me a favor and he won't, punish me as much. It's not true in Kane's case. Like I said, he still punishes everyone the same, but he makes them think that he's not. And it's extremely effective, at least in his case. He does it very well. Now there's kind of an in between, and I call them tough love commissars, because they are in between. So the biggest example is Gaunt. So he does care a lot about his troopers. He doesn't want to throw them away needlessly, but he does stick to the regulations pretty closely in most instances. There's some, different play that happens within the stories in the books that I don't want to spoil. But most of the time he follows the regulations, especially the really big ones. So if you see a trooper that's, starting to have some sort of, psychic manifestation, he still follows those duties. They're executed or they're turned over to the Inquisition or whoever, if possible. Kane would probably actually do the same thing, truth be told. But just the point is that he's more. The tough love commissars are more by the book. Not entirely like your zealot commissars, your stereotypical commissars, but much more so than Kane. But they, instead of, like I said, enforcing through fear, they enforce through mutual respect and lead by example of feats of valor. Making the tough decisions, making the sacrifice, or going back for a trooper that was, got caught in something, or whatever, feats of valor to inspire the troops and to gain their respect. Again, rather than ruling through fear. Now they are more prone to summary executions. They are much less hesitant to do a summary execution than a Kane type. In fact, I can't think of a time that Kane actually did a battlefield execution that I can recall. I can't think of any. He's threatened it a lot, but I don't think he's actually done it. Whereas Gaunt, I know for sure he has. Anyway, so yeah. Now, keep in mind, these are the types of commissars that have been shown mostly in the books. Kane, obviously, he has his own series. the tough love commissars, which is again that's more like Gaunt, but I feel like there'd be a lot more of those types than you think. And then you have the stereotypical one. But I mean, if you think about the size, the scale of the Imperium, you're talking about. I mean, the Imperial Guard is billions of troopers. Like, not even exaggerating, billions, maybe even trillions of Imperial Guard troopers, right? And you have one commissar for every regiment. There's probably millions of commissars. Not even exaggerating. Probably millions of these guys running around the galaxy, right? And they're all going to have different ways of doing things. They were all taught by somebody else, who's taught by somebody else, who's taught by somebody else. They've had different experiences. They've worked for different troopers, or been attached to different, regiments, whatever. They're all going to operate in different ways. These are just the three most common that I've seen so far. But so don't take everything that I'm saying as like, oh, they fall into these three categories. These are just kind of very generic categories that I've observed. Who's the worst commissar I know of, and who is the best you know of? Ooh, the best one, that's tough. That's a hard one. The worst, though, is was in one of the Kane books, Thomas Beige. His name is literally Beige, and he was a cadet with Kane at the Scola, but he's basically the antithesis of Kane. Like, he's more of the stereotypical commissar, and he calls him an emperor botherer. So, like, when you have those really religious, Christians that come to your, are like, well, Jesus wouldn't want that kind of deal. Very religious, very zealous. He's one of those guys, and so he, correctly, though he doesn't know, he doesn't actually know it, thinks that Kane is either, well, Kane's not corrupted, but he thinks that Kane is corrupted or a coward, or both, and falsely accuses him of desertion and taking of Imperial Guard assets and all this, all these other things, which, had he been proven guilty, he would have been executed. Even as a hero at the point of his career that he was, if that was proven to be true, he would have been executed. And had he successfully stopped Kane in what he was doing, most likely there would have been a Daemon world at the end of it. So, yeah, definitely the worst commissar that I know of. Ad break in 4 seconds. So I will answer that second part here in a second. It hasn't started yet. So the best. Oh God, that's a tough one. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to say Yurik. I have to say Yurik. He's the OG. He's the GOAT. And I will gush about him. He's actually will be my first favorite commissar that I talk about at length here, actually, in the next section. So I will go into him more, but Yurik is an old man who just exudes supreme badass energy. That's all I'll say for now. So you'll hear more of why of that in a bit here. Actually, here's some art of Yurik that'll come up in a little bit. But if you see a commissar with an orc power claw, that's Yurik. It says there's an ad starting, but it's not. Oh, there it goes. Let's see. So yeah, how are you doing, Eris? Are you still hanging around there? Pineapple on. Oh God. Not like that. Yeah, we're not in the gutter tonight. We're gonna save that for the Slanesh stream. All right, 16 seconds left on the ad break, and then I'll continue here. I mean, this is being recorded on YouTube, so I'll say that here in a second. Okay, ad break over. So, continuing on where I was, I'm going to throw this out here too. So, this is also streaming to YouTube currently, which is also... Look at I should say wood. Yeah, it's kind of scary. So, if you missed something because of an ad or feel like you did, the ad, at least the recording, is ad-free, and YouTube will still have ads, but you won't miss anything on the YouTube VOD. Or the Twitch VOD, actually, because I forgot that sticks around too. Yeah. So, the last type of Commissar I want to talk about are the ones attached to the Navy, which basically they're not talked about beyond the fact that they exist. So, I don't have a lot to say on them because not a lot is said about them. So I can't really tell you how I think they operate. And also the demands of the Navy are, vastly different than the Imperial Guard. They're faced with different challenges. So they operate in probably a whole different way. Maybe not entirely different, but at least in some ways, I would think they operate differently. So yeah. Alrighty. So the second to last portion of this, and boy, I hope I have enough time to get through all of it, are my favorite Commissars. And I did add a fourth. She's relatively new to the roster, and I don't know a ton about her, but she'll be the last one I cover. But my three favorite Commissars, and so I've talked about him a little bit. And as far as like the best Commissars, I think he takes this. This is Commissar Sebastian Yurik. He's also known as the hero of Hades Hive, and has the nickname of "Do I Simp for the Hardest?" Oh man, probably still Yurik, I would say. Kane is a very, very close second because I've really come to really like Kane a lot. But Yurik is just like he exudes. He's such just a monster. He's such a badass. Anyway, he's actually who I'm talking about right now. So, like I said, he's the hero of Hades Hive, and he's referred to as Old Baelai by the orcs. And realistically, out of all the Commissars, he's in the setting. He's probably the most famous. Yarrick, Yarrick. It's 40k. They always spell things crazy. But within the setting, he is hands down probably the most famous Commissar. Like from one end of the Imperium to the other. Yeah, Daddy Yarrick. He's the one that like basically everybody knows about, and for good reason. Mostly involved, pretty much almost exclusively involving the orcs, which I will get into. But Yarrick has always hated orcs. That's his thing. He's always had a strong hatred of orcs because his home planet was invaded by the orcs when he was a child, and slaughtered everybody on this planet. He somehow managed to survive, from hiding. But he hid and managed to survive through this like slaughter led by these orcs. So he's always had a deep hatred of them. But as a boy, like literally a boy, he's laying traps. He was killing Gretchen. I think I don't know if he was killing with his bare hands, but Gretchen are like midway in terms of like fantasy, like we're talking D&D, like high fantasy kind of shit. They're like a hobgoblin, like in between a goblin and an orc, like that in between stage. I think they're about the size of an adolescent. And then the ones that are like goblins are grots, or Gretchen. No, not Gretchen, excuse me, grots are more like goblins. I think I'm getting that analogy correct. But they're basically like smaller, like they're like a smaller subspecies of orcs. But anyway, he was a 10-year-old boy killing these things. And he survived killing these Gretchen, foraging, and hiding from the big orcs. Eventually, an Imperial flotilla shows up, lands on the planet, takes it back, whatever. And this Imperial Guard squad finds this 10-year-old boy who's basically feral for however long he was there alone. He's feral on this planet, killing Gretchen on his own at 10 years old. And so when they found him, he was just like, he's basically like mentally an adult by the time they found him. Like he like witnessed so many horrifying things and killed however many of these Gretchen, and brutal survival type of shit for however long. Like his eyes were just steel. And Yurik was his grandfather's surname. And he decided to take it, and I can't quite remember the reason behind that, but I think it was because his grandfather was basically a tough old bastard, and yeah, there's a whole thing there. I can't quite remember. And he actually later on in life he learned Orcish from a human raider who had once been a prisoner of the Greenskins. So Yurik had a long career. He did a bunch of different things. But what he's known for the most is the Second War of Armageddon. This is where a lot of his fame has come from. This is like the pivotal moment of his career. And the funny thing about it is, so the Second War of Armageddon was a huge orc a huge orc invasion led by my favorite orc, Warboss Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka, invaded Armageddon, which was was it a hive world? It's a very important world. Like a lot of shit came out of Armageddon. In fact, a really famous Imperial Guard regiment comes from Armageddon. That's the Armageddon Steel Legion. They're the guys that they're like Krieg adjacent. Anyway, so Second War of Armageddon is Gazkul invading Armageddon. The funniest thing about that is the day that this invasion force, this Orcish invasion force, starts to land on Armageddon, was supposed to be the day that Yurik was supposed to retire. Like he's an old man at the point this war kicks off. Literally the day before he was going to retire, and this war starts. Now, like I said before, Yurik is like a hardline, by the book Commissar. And so the planetary governor of Armageddon, Herman von Strabe, I believe is how that's pronounced, basically, shuffled Yurik over to Hades Hive. It's kind of not like a backwater hive, but it was just more out of the way. Because he didn't want to deal with Yurik because he was extremely incompetent and kind of a pussy. Kind of a coward. He's basically left to deal with Hades Hive on his own and whatever forces were there. So, as time goes on, von Strabe is, like I said, he's very incompetent. He's leading, making extremely poor strategic decisions, and so Armageddon is slowly being lost because he's just garbage at his job. Up until they collide with Yurik in charge of the defense of Hades Hive. His hive, the forces he led there, were stopped. This huge, powerful invasion force of orcs is stopped at this hive by Yurik and his defenders after they've been taking this planet. So much so that eventually Gazkul sends one of his most prominent subordinates, like one of his most prominent warlords, named Ugelhard, to lead the assault on Hades Hive itself, because it's not falling. It's not falling. Whereas every other hive has gone down, relatively quickly. And Hades isn't. And so Gazkul sends Ugelhard there. And so the battle plays out. But during the assault, so the warlord at this point knows, not Ghazghkull, but Ugelhard knows of Yorick, and they meet each other in single combat. This old-ass Commissar and an orc war boss, effectively, like this big-ass orc. He had a power claw. So during combat, this orc war boss cuts off his right arm from the elbow down. And big badass Yorick, like any person who just suddenly gets an arm cut off from the elbow down, is going to go into shock pretty quickly. Well, Yorick is such a BA, he did not do that. Instead, the orc was, being an orc and, haha, I'm awesome. Yorick gets up and just cuts his fucking head off. Just chops it right off. In front of the other thing is in front of this entire orc army. He kills their war boss. He then proceeds to cut off the power claw from this orc's arm and holds it over his head in triumph in front of this army. And the whole assault breaks. The whole orc assault starts to crumble after he kills this war boss in hand-to-hand combat. And then the flip side to that is all the defenders under his command are now like super jacked. Like, holy shit, this Commissar, this old man, just killed a war boss in single combat. Like, yeah, like I said, he is the badass of badasses. I love Yorick. And he never passed out until after the assault was completely driven off, and then he allowed himself to pass out, is how the story goes. No, he allowed himself to pass out. He didn't pass out. He's like, okay, it's fine now. The job is done. Now, this is where he really starts to get, like, fucking cool. Like, that whole part, it's like, wow, that's awesome. So, while he's recovering from this fight, he gets the power claw that he took as a trophy from this war boss. He has it modified and grafted onto his arm as a prosthetic. So that's why when you see art of him, that's how you always know who Yorick is, and that's why I say he's the most famous, because if you ever see a Commissar with a fucking orc power claw for a right arm, that's Yorick. There's no other Commissar like him. He's the only one that has a fucking orc power claw for an arm. And it's awesome. I love it. On top of that, so he had gained a reputation from the orcs as having an evil eye. So as part of that, he had his left eye replaced with a prosthetic that had a built-in pulse laser in his eye. So that prosthetic that you'll see on his face, it is an eye, but it is also a fucking laser. And so that's part of where he gets his nickname Old Bale Eye, because he, the orc superstition was that he could kill with a look. Well, now he literally could. So after he recovers, he has this, this power claw grafted onto his arm. He's got the laser put in his eye. He defends. And I should say, through this process, he actually ends up executing von Strabe for incompetence and basically takes over the entirety of the local war effort on Armageddon. That's actually a pretty big thing that I almost skipped, so that's my bad. But he basically takes over as commander-in-chief for all of the Second War of Armageddon. Up until, so for 6 months, he's holding off this orc invasion with no reinforcements from the wider Imperium yet. So for 6 months, he's holding this huge army back at Hades Hive. And his with his resolve, like his ability to keep these troopers going against like the most impossible odds, and his direct intervention multiple times, keeps throwing these orc assaults back, to the point where finally Ghazghkull himself, Big Daddy Ghazghkull war boss, sees Yerrick as a worthy opponent. So that's a huge deal. If you don't know anything about orcs, in 40k, they love to fight, and they basically go around the universe thinking everybody's a wimp, but they still want to fight everybody. They want to look for the best fight possible. So for an orc to sit there, and an orc war boss, for that matter, like the biggest, baddest orc war boss since the Beast, sees you as a worthy opponent, like, that's something. That's crazy. Like, this is the other reason why I love Yerrick, because he's like, he is mutually respected and feared by orcs. Like, not all of them, because all of them don't know of his existence, but most of them know of his reputation, and he's feared and respected by all of them, which is nuts. Ghazghkull decides to lead this assault against Hades Hive, specifically because he wants to beat Yerrick directly. He wants to kill this Commissar, or fight this, worthy opponent that he has seen. And he's almost successful. So, towards the end of the siege, the city's breaking, the defenders have just about all been slaughtered. Like, it's down to Yerrick and, like, very small pockets of resistance. And the only reason he survives is a relief force finally shows up, and there's a group of a good chunk of the Blood Angels that show up, and they launch they basically launched a drop assault on the orc rear lines, and just between what was left of Hades Hive and the assault led by the Blood Angels, just shattered. So that's how the Second War of Armageddon ended, effectively. Through all that, Yerrick survives, one of the few survivors from Hades Hive. However, during this assault, Ghazghkull manages to escape. And so when he escapes, Yerrick vows to hunt this dude, this war boss down, because he's the single largest orc threat in the galaxy at this time. Like, Ghazghkull, like, sees himself, and probably is, a prophet of Gork and Mork, which is the orc gods. And he's, through sheer force of will, like, amassed, like, huge alliances of orc tribes. Well, I shouldn't say alliances, but he's brought a bunch of them to heal. Like, they all serve him, like, millions of orcs. And so, yeah, he's a big deal. So Yerrick promises to hunt him down. So during this hunt, he ends up actually getting captured by Ghazghkull. And it's like, okay, well, he's just boned, right? Well, so what happens is he has all his augmetics removed, so his laser eye, his power claw, all of his weapons, he's like stripped down to his underclothes, like pants or trousers and a shirt. And he's on this Space Hulk, which is basically like, it's basically like, think of it as like a ship graveyard, except it's a bunch of ships like amalgamated together because of the warp. Or it's a big fucking asteroid with a bunch of other stuff jammed into it because of the warp. Orcs like to use them as like mobile bases and planetary invasion craft by crashing them into the planet. Actually, that's one of the things that Ghazghkull does during the Second War of Armageddon, is he crashes a Space Hulk full of orcs onto this planet to start the invasion. And, like, Space Hulks are gigantic. Like, they're huge. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of orcs, even after crash landings, survive to start this invasion. So that's why they use them. Anyway, so he's captured by Ghazghkull. He's put on this Space Hulk as an orcish prisoner. And so he manages to band together like a small group of prisoners. And he manages to start a jailbreak. There's actually a part where he's thrown into like this pit that has I can't remember if it has like if it had actual orcs in it, or just like crazy big squigs. I can't remember. And squigs are like They're like a subspecies of orcs, except they're quadrupedal and they're usually just giant running mouths. Anyway, but he's thrown into this pit of like meat with all these squigs, and he has to like climb out of this pit as like a test. But anyway, eventually, so he leads these prisoners on like an escape attempt. He's successful. He gets to, and so his whole goal is he wants to kill Ghazghkull. He doesn't care. He's like damn near completely unarmed. He doesn't have his power claw. He doesn't have his laser eye. He still wants to kill Ghazghkull. He is bound and determined to kill this war boss. He doesn't care that he's not armed. He's gonna kill him. So he makes his way to the bridge, or they call it a temple of the Space Hulk. Ghazghkull's not there. So instead, he decides he's going to try and, because this was an amalgamation of like spaceships. So he goes to, and the orcs had all wired them into one central station because they're orcs and that's what they do. They want to go fast and they want all the DACA. It's how they work. So, on this bridge where all these ships are basically welded together, he starts all their engines up to try and force the Space Hulk to rip itself apart. There's like an explosion or something. He passes out. Wakes up later with his power claw reattached, his laser eye reinserted, all his weapons and stuff are returned to him, and walks out of this room into a hangar, and there's fucking Ghazghkull standing there with an honor guard of knobs for Yarrick. And he loads him up onto an Imperial shuttle and lets him leave. Like, he passed this crazy ass test that Ghazghkull had for him, and he lets him go. And so his underlings, like, they asked him, like, well, why he did this? And Ghazghkull, all he says is, good enemies is hard to find. I can't do the accent at all. I suck. Good enemies is hard to find. But yeah, Yarrick is the first and only human to have gained genuine respect from an orc war boss. The only one. Which is it's just crazy. Like, because orcs are effectively, not always, but most of the time are about as strong as a Space Marine is naturally. Like, that's just how they are. Like, literally able to rip a standard human apart with their bare hands if they wanted to. So they're not to be trifled with. And a war boss, the way that orcs work, the higher up they are in terms of their quote-unquote chain of command, the physically larger they get. Like, literally, the more forces they have under their command, or the more orcs that they have beaten into submission, because that's actually how they, you kill the guy above you to get his position. That's how it works with orcs. But they are quite literally the physically largest orcs on the field. And they usually have their version of power armor and, their version of their augmetics and, like, gigantic weapons because they're bigger. So to gain the actual, like, to be acknowledged by a war boss, for a war boss to know who you are personally and to respect you as an opponent, is just, like, I don't know. I can't think of anything fucking crazier than that for a standard human. I mean, I probably could. But as far as, like, how you are perceived by an enemy, like, race in 40k, as, like, universally feared and respected as a normal old man, is pretty fantastic. Like, that's awesome. That's one of my favorite aspects of Yarrick as a character. Is just to have this sheer determination and cunning that's so strong, so noticeable in so many, like, active ways, that a species as barbaric and violent and only cares about raw physical strength and how much violence you can inflict upon your enemies. um, to be known and respected by them, to make it past that level of barbarity, to register as and across a species, just about, is just crazy to me. But that's about as much as I want to gush about Yarick. Except, I have an excerpt, and it's probably my favorite excerpt from Yarick, and it actually doesn't. It takes place during right before the start of the Third War for Armageddon, which is yet another invasion by Ghazghkull. And it's honestly more of a vanity thing because he wants to beat Yarick and he wants to take Armageddon. But the Third War for Armageddon is led by Ghazghkull again, and so this is right before the Third War for Armageddon starts. You know, they know it's coming. The Imperium knows it's been coming for a while. And so this is at a war council. This takes place during the book Hell's Reach, which is a fantastic book. Highly recommend it. It's from the perspective of the Black Templar Reclusiarch Merrick Grimaldus. And it is a great read. And Yarick's only featured in it in this one piece. But it is a fantastic excerpt. So I'm going to read it to you guys, and you'll see why. Probably get a better idea of why I love Yarick so much. Hades' hive will not survive the first week. The man speaking is ancient, and he looks every hour of his age. What keeps him on his feet is a mixture of minimal, rejuvenate chem surgeries, crude bionics, and a faith in the Emperor founded in hatred for the enemies of man. I liked him the moment my visor's targeting reticles locked onto him. Both piety and hate echo in his every word. He should not hold rank here, not to the degree he does. He is merely a commissar in the Imperial Guard, and such a title does not tend to make generals, colonels, Astartes captains, and chapter masters remain in polite silence when it comes to tactical planning. Yet to the humans at this war council and the citizens of Armageddon, he is the old man. A beloved hero of the Second War 57 years ago. Not just a hero, the hero. He is Sebastian Yarick. Even we Astartes must respect that name. And when he tells us all that Hades' hive will be destroyed within a matter of days, 100 Imperial commanders, human and Astartes alike, hang on his every word. I am one of them. This will be my first true command. Commissar Sebastian Yarick leans over the edge of a hololithic display table. With his remaining hand, the other arm is nothing but a stump. Because during meetings he would disconnect his power claw. Is nothing but a stump. He keys in the coordinates on the numeric datapad, and the hololith projection of Hades' hive widens with flickering impatience to display both of the planet's hemispheres in insignificant detail. The old man, a gaunt and wizened human of sharp features and skeletally obvious facial bones, gestures to the blip on the map that represents Hades' hive and its surrounding territories. Wastelands in the main. 6 decades ago, he says, the great enemy met his defeat at Hades. That's the first war for Armageddon. Or, no, second. Excuse me. First was a whole other thing. Anyway. Our defense here has won us that war. There are general murmurs of assent. The Commissar's voice carries around the expansive chamber through floating skull drones equipped with Fox speakers where their jaws had once been. I'm surrounded by the familiar hum of active power armor, though the scents and faces that meet my eyes are new to me. Standing to my left at a respectful distance, his face raggedly proud around extensive bionics, is Chapter Master Seth of the Flesh Terrors, known to his men as the Guardian of the Rage. He smells of sacred weapons oils, his Primarch's potent blood running beneath his weathered skin, and the spicy and wholesome reptilian scent of the lizard predator kings that stalk the jungles of his homeworld. Seth is flanked by his own officers, all bareheaded and with faces as pitted and cracked as their masters. Whatever wars have occupied the Flesh Terrors in recent decades, the conflicts have not been kind to them. To my left, my liege Helbrecht stands resplendent in his battle armor of black and bronze. Bayard, the Emperor's champion, is by his side. Both rest their helmets on the table's surface, the stern helms distorting the edge of the hololithic display and give their full attention to the ancient Commissar. I cross my arms over my chest and do the same. Why? Someone asks. Their voice is low, too low to be human, and carries over the chamber without the need of vox amplification. 100 heads turn to regard an Astartes in the bright red orange of a lesser chapter, one unknown to me. He steps forward, leaning his knuckles on the table, facing Yerick from almost 20 meters distance. We recognize Brother Captain Amaris, an Imperial Herald announces from his position at Yerick's side, smoothing the formal blue dress robes of his office. He bangs the butt of his staff on the ground 3 times. Commander of the Angels of Fire. Amaris nods in thanks and fixes Yerick with his unblinking gaze. Why would the Greenskin warlords simply annihilate the greatest battlefield of the last war? Surely our forces should muster at Hades and stand ready to defend against the largest assault. So the assumption is here that because Ghazghkull lost at Hades Hive during the Second War for Armageddon, and it was such a hit to his pride and his vanity that he's going to try and take Hades again. So that was kind of an idea that they had. Let's see. Okay, continuing. Murmurs of agreement ripple throughout the gathered commanders. Emboldened, Amaris smiles at Yerick. We are the Emperor's chosen mortal. We are his angels of death. We have centuries of battle experience compared to these human commanders at your side. Got a minute and a half until the ad break. Let's see, I'll do this last bit here. And then there's a little more, but I'll continue after the ad. No, another voice replies. This one is distorted into a vox-born snarl, filtered through Helm's speakers. I swallow as the herald bangs the staff another 3 times. I had not realized I had spoken out aloud. We recognize Brother Chaplain Grimaldus, he calls out, Reclusiarch of the Black Templars. So let's see. So the perspective shifts here to the person. There's a bit more. We're almost there, though. Why I love Yerick so much, or part of it, kind of, I think this piece, or this excerpt, like, really captures just how much of a BA that Yerick is. And we're almost to that part. But with 40 seconds left, I don't want to be interrupted. So yeah, if there's any quick questions somebody wants to toss at me, I can answer those here on the ad break and chat. And yeah, and then after it's over, I'll continue reading this bit. Or I might run and grab a drink if nobody has any questions at the moment. Just depends. It's on you. Oh, but yeah. Hell's Reach, man. Oh, it's such a good book. I listened to... so there's actually... there's a fantastic... for new people of the lore and people well-versed. So for that, honestly, the Kane books are a fantastic entry into 40k because it's meant to have more humor in it, but it still aptly captures just how dark the 40k universe can be. Like that part about execution training, that came out of, for like kids, that came out of the Kane books. But it's more lighthearted, it's less hard into the serious stuff. So that's the one I always recommend for like brand new people, and even people who've been in it for a while. Like I haven't talked to anybody who doesn't like the Kane books. I'm sure they exist, and that's fine. But as a general rule, the Kane books are a fantastic place to start. And there's the ad. But yeah. As far as other recommendations, I mean, the Gaunt's Ghost books are great. Like, can't go wrong with the Gaunt's Ghosts. There's also the Eisenhorn series. I'm gonna have to repeat all this for Kat. But yeah, so the Gaunt's Ghost books are great. But they're more serious, like much more serious. Much more dark. They get into like the much deeper into the darker side of 40k, like the really, crazy stuff. Really, people getting their eyes removed as a form of torture and their skin flayed kind of thing. all the fun and nasty things that you would expect out of 40k, they cover in the Gaunt's Ghost books. Another suggestion, and Those are written by Dan Abnett, which, in my personal opinion, he is the best Black Library author. Some people may disagree, and that's fine. But I think Dan Abnett's the best. I like any of the books he's written. I have not had a problem with. But yeah, Dan Abnett's probably the best Black Library author. Did not write Hell's Reach, and Hell's Reach is fantastic. But as a general rule, if you see Dan Abnett's name on a cover, it's going to be good, in my opinion. Anyway, continuing on with the excerpt here. Grimaldus shook his head at the gathered commanders. Over 100 human Astartes, all standing around the huge table in this converted auditorium once used for whatever dreary theater performances occurred on a manufactory world. That's right, Armageddon was a manufactory world. A riot of colors, heraldry, symbols of unity, varied uniforms, regimental designations, and iconography. General Kurov stood at the Commissar's shoulder, deferring to the old man in all things. An old man is capitalized. Anyway. The Xenos do not think as we do, Grimaldus said. The Greenskins do not come to Armageddon for vengeance, or to seek to bleed us for the defeats they have suffered at Imperial hands in the past. They come for the pleasure of violence, which is true. Yerrick, a skeleton wreathed in pale flesh and a dark uniform, watched the night in silence. Amaris pounded his fist under the table and pointed at the Templar. For a moment of deathly calm, Grimaldus considered drawing his pistol and slaying him where he stood. That lends credence to my belief, Amaris almost snarled. Not at all. Have you inspected what remains of Hades' hive? It is a ruin. There is nothing to fight over, nothing to defend. The great enemy knows this. He'll be aware that Imperial forces will put up no more than a token resistance here, and fall back to defend hives that are still worth defending. It is likely the warlord will obliterate Hades from orbit rather than seek to take it. We cannot let this hive fall. It is a symbol of mankind's defiance. Worth respect, Chaplain. Enough, Yerrick said. Peace, brother Captain Amaris. Grimaldus speaks with wisdom. Grimaldus inclined his head in thanks. I will not be silenced by a mortal, Amaris growled, but the fight was gone from him. Yerrick, the thin and ancient commissar, just stared at the Astartes captain. After several moments, Amaris looked back to the hololithic topography around the hive. Yerrick turned back to the gathered officers, his one human eye stern and his augmetic one whirring in its socket as it refocused on the faces before him. So, old man commissar just stares down a space marine captain in full power armor into silence. That's why I love this guy. A little bit more here and then we're done. Hades will not survive the first week, he said again, this time shaking his head. We must abandon the hive and spread the forces here to other bastions of strength. This is not the second war. What is coming in system now far exceeds what has laid waste to the planet before. The other hives must be reinforced 1,000 times over. He took a moment to clear his throat and a cough stole over him, dry and hoarse. When it subsided, the old man smiled without even the ghost of humor. Hades will burn. We must take our stand elsewhere. And that's it. So, I think that excerpt just like nails Yerrick to a T. Like this man, he's just so. I mean, he's earned the respect to be that way, but just the weight of his personality, like baseline human, called mortals by Space Marines because they're viewed as so beneath them. Stares, and a captain no less. So like he's probably been around for centuries, at least decades, in war. Gets stared down by this 200-year-old commissar who looks like a skeleton on, like a walking skeleton, just about. Oh, it's just fantastic. But yeah, so as far as if you want to learn about Yerrick, the best way to do that, at least before the Third War of Armageddon, is the Yerrick Omnibus, written by David Annandale. Great book. I've read it a few times, and it covers, Yerrick's early career, all the way up to just before the Third War for Armageddon, like after he's captured by Ghazghkull and then is let free after all that. Great omnibus. Yeah, good times. So my next favorite commissar, and I've mentioned him a few times already, is Commissar Caiaphas Cain. That's spelled Ciaphascain. Caiaphas Cain. And you'll probably remember the most prominent time I'd mentioned him is a commissarial leadership style is named after him. Well, he's the only one who does it, and technically his cadets do as well. But it's his particular type of style. So, he's not as famous as Yerrick. Like, he's not a name that's known from one side of the Imperium to the other. Like, he's very well known within in and around the Damocles Gulf, which is in the eastern fringe, which is adjacent to the Ultima Segmentum. It's sort of kind of a part of it, but not really. But yeah, he's very famous in a good chunk of the Imperium, not the whole Imperium though. So he's not as famous as Yerrick, but still up there. And like I said, his leadership style is different, but it is extremely effective. So, for example, the regiment that he's in his books that he's talked about being with the most is the Valhallan 597th, which was a amalgamation of two single-sex regiments, so a female and a male single-sex regiments that were basically had a 50% attrition rate. And so, as I mentioned before the Munitorum, the logistics ends, they don't care. They just see half a regiment. All right, stick them together. We got a whole regiment, and they don't give a shit. They were the 296th and the 301st. And so, battle-hardened veterans who aren't used to being around the opposite sex or serving with them, and there's a lot of friction, and there's a riot actually that resulted in a few people dying, and that was how he was introduced to the 597th. And he, through his particular style of not ruling through fear but through mutual respect, really worked for him. Oh, I didn't realize that my ambient music had turned off. That's fine. Anyway, so that's how he was introduced to the regiment he's most famously attached to, is the 597th. But he served in a few others and in a few other capacities. Anyway, but as far as his origin, he claims to have been raised in an underhive, which is like, because when imperial cities get bigger, they just build over top of whatever was there before, and that's what forms the underhive. It's just chunks of city they've built over, like whole cities underneath cities underneath cities. Like, hive cities are massive. But yeah, everything that's below surface level is the underhive, and he claims to have grown up in an underhive. He doesn't say which hive world he came from or even the name of the hive, and it's possible he doesn't know either of those. But this is confirmed because he has he is insanely good at fighting in very enclosed quarters. So like sewers, the underhive, the insides of spaceships. Like, he just has a knack for enclosed spaces. To the point where he has an extremely good sense of direction, even if he's completely underground. Like, a fantastic sense of direction. And he has such good instincts that he can tell relatively how far away he is from the walls of a space, just off the sound in complete darkness. And he's able to filter out the noises of vermin for, say boot steps or, or the scrabbling of a gene stealer, kind of deal. So he's he's a fantastic at underground fighting, or, not underground, but closed in fighting, and, navigating through, the labyrinth of an underhive, because a hive in general is a labyrinth, but an underhive is truly one. Often they're not really mapped. I mean, they are to a degree, but most of the time they're not fully mapped. And like, as far as the rest of the hive is concerned, it barely exists. Like, nobody really knows how many people live down there or what lives down there, because there's a lot of things that aren't people that live down there. And I'm not just talking about the rats. And of course, being an underhive, that's of course where chaos cultists like to go, and gene stealers, and face eaters, and all sorts of things. All of them pretty unpleasant. But yeah. Yes, mutants. Lots of mutants. That's where all the mutants are shunned to, is the underhive. Yes. Kill the mutant. But yeah, anything that Kane has said about his homeworld, should basically just be doubted seriously, because he is a self-admitted, pathological liar. He will say damn near anything to get what he wants to get the reaction he wants out of somebody. But he is also known as a hero of the Imperium. His outward appearance is that of this super stalwart hero. He's pulled the Imperium from the brink of the abyss because honor and duty and all this stuff. But actually, he's a gigantic coward. He only cares about himself, with two notable exceptions. One being Jurgen, the other one being Inquisitor Vale, which I'll talk about them a little bit more here in a bit. Only cares about himself. He loves, the finer things in life. Great amasec, fantastic food. Lots of women. He's a womanizer up until he starts getting with Inquisitor Vale. Bit of a womanizer. Talks about cleavage and butts, and talks about the comfort of women and all this other things. He's great. I love Kane. He's hilarious. But he's also a badass, despite the fact he is a coward. He doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to be on the front line. He just wants to live and have a good time. But yeah, he's a gambler. He's a fantastic card shark. One of my favorite lines of his is something about, he's talking about playing cards against some Skitari, I believe. And he says something about the fact that he thinks that the troopers were under the mistaken impression that something about cards being a game of chance or whatever, basically implying that he can do whatever he wants with cards. He just knows how to bluff and whatever to get what he wants out of a card game. He's a card shark. Now, the hilarious thing about the way he thinks through situations, because he is a commissar, he can't just, and he's assigned to regiments, he can't just not go to the battlefield. So he has to manipulate situations to get him away from where he thinks the fighting's going to be the worst, right? Well, the funny thing is when he does this, most of the time it actually throws him closer into the center of events. And you would think that he would just run away, but the larger his reputation has become, the more that he is viewed as a hero by more people, the more he is implied to keep that reputation, because he gains so much from it. He gets, invited to banquets with nobles constantly. Whenever he goes to a new planet, within the area around the Damocles Gulf, he's a celebrity. He's a big ass celebrity, so of course he doesn't want to ruin it. He gets gets women, he gets, booze, he gets best food, he gets, best places to sleep, blah, 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 right? So he wants to preserve that reputation, while at the same time not being put into combat, which is next to impossible. But he does do a lot of stuff to manipulate events in a way he thinks is going to keep him the most out of the line of fire. It doesn't work out that way very often. In fact, there's a meme that goes around about Kane about how I got up in the middle of the night to make myself a sandwich, and that's how I saved, X planet from X threat kind of deal. Like that, it's quite not that literal, but it's in that same vein where he just goes to do like, something that seems mundane, and it turns out that like, oh no, that's actually like, the main headquarters for like this chaos cult, or that's where the fucking Gene Stealer patriarch is, kind of thing. It's great, and he always blames the Emperor for having a dark sense of humor at his expense. Anyway, so he'd been posted to a lot of things that, like I mentioned, the Valhalla 597th. That was the one he's most known for. But before that, he was also attached to his first unit was the 12th Valhallan Field Artillery, because he thought it was exemplary field artillery unit. He had actually won his posting in a card game against an administratum clerk or munitorum clerk to get assigned to this regiment, because he thought in an artillery unit he's going to be as far away from the front lines as possible. All he has to do is sit there and watch cannons go off all the time. So yeah, very funny. There was a bit where he was actually attached to the Lord General's staff for the Eastern Fringe, as their commissar, for a bit, and he actually ended up getting attached to a company of Space Marines from the Reclaimers chapter for a bit, and actually has one sort of kind of friend in that chapter, and some other positive acquaintances. I'll say they have a good opinion of him. But so the crazy thing about Kane, though, this guy who has no desire to be in combat whatsoever, has fought like just about every single enemy the Imperium has. We're talking Eldar, Dark Eldar, Corsairs, Orcs, Tau, Tyranids, Necrons, Chaos Cultists, Traitor Marines, and Daemons on a few occasions. And his weapons that he always uses are the chainsword and the las pistol he was given when he was promoted from cadet to commissar. He's using the same two weapons. They're described as battered and used, but he's used them for so long they're just an extension of his body at this point. Shoot. Oh, 10 minutes till that break. Okay. Oh, goodness. There we are. Yeah. But the funny thing is that he is like I said before, you'd expect him to be brave, but he's not. He's terrified. He constantly tells in his like lay it all out there archive, his personal memoir, that he didn't publish, but he like tried to be as honest as possible, and he's terrified all the time. Like he talks about his bowels spasming constantly in fear, which is great. But what's funny is to keep up this appearance of being this hero, of keeping this reputation that he's built. He's an expert at assembly. Like he's shitting his pants internally, but from the exterior, he's got like a smile on his face. Like that. There's that one piece of art where he's standing there. You'll see him. Where he's standing there and he's got like that confident smile on his face. Well, he's actually like absolutely fucking terrified with that look on his face. And so he both loves, because of all the stuff that he's been involved in. Oh, here it comes. There it is. Yeah, he's got like that cocky grin on his face, and yeah, that whole thing. He's actually terrified. That's just the face. He's so good at masking how he feel, like his fear and what he's actually thinking. Um, you know, it forces him into actions he wouldn't normally take. To, like I said, live up to his reputation. Um, so yeah, yeah. So he like I said, he both loves and he hates this reputation he's gained. Because as a hero, you're expected to continue to do heroic things, which he very much does not want to do. Now, one thing that I have to talk about, because if I bring up Kane, there's one person that I absolutely have to talk about with him. And I've mentioned his name before, and that is Gunnar Ferric Jurgen. Now, Jurgen is his aide. So he was a trooper, or in this case a gunner, because he was in the artillery, the Valhalla 12th Field Artillery, with Kane, and that was actually where Jurgen gets assigned as his aide, because of heroic action on Kane's part. But Jurgen is described as like supremely unattractive, both like visually and olfactory, like smell wise. He fucking reeks. Kane describes his smell as a mix of old unwashed socks and moldy cheese on several occasions. His uniform is always disheveled. Like, he basically looks like he crawled out of a trash heap. He wears the standard Valhallan uniform, but he also has like numerous pouches strapped across his chest at all times with various odds and ends. And actually, you'll see Jurgen to the left of Kane in that art that comes through. And he always, after, I believe it was Gravelax, Kane's first major. Well, this is like right after he joined the 597th. Their first major engagement was on Gravelax, and Jurgen has a certain knack for scrounging. Like, he just finds things, and the implication is he just takes them because he can, because he's seconded to the commissariat. So if he's taking from the Imperial Guard, they literally can't tell him no. And in fact, he actually has a note from Kane saying such, which is great. But aside from his look, he's actually a fantastic aide. Like, he does all the menial paperwork shit that Kane doesn't want to do. He gets him tea, he gets him food. Like, Jurgen makes it a point to, whatever planet they visit, like, he goes and like finds like unique delicacies to give to Kane, and finds him the best quarters he can. He drives him around. Like, he is a legitimately fantastic aide. He's also insanely loyal, does not question orders at all, and actually takes them so literally it's almost a detriment. Like, if you tell him to take the shortest route from point A to point B, he will literally do that. He will drive through anything to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. Like, that literally. For the most part. However, the biggest thing about him is that he is a psychic blank. And a blank is basically the opposite of a psyker. They're an anti-psyker, and so they emit an aura of psychic nullification, which, to put it in fantasy terms, he emits an anti-psychic field. Yeah, Kane is a bard. Yeah, that's actually pretty accurate. Yeah. Except he's also like probably the best swordsman in at least the Eastern Fringe, possibly the Ultima Segmentum. That's coming from Inquisitor Vale, so who knows? But yeah, he is actually like a superlative warrior. Like, that's aside from his ability to manipulate, like, he is like an almost unmatched swordsman and like just warrior in general, which is really funny to pair that with his cowardice. Um, but yeah, so Jurgen is an anti-psyker, and so to put it short, what that means is that he has an anti-magic field that also affects daemons or no, well, like daemons and psychers. So psychers will lose their powers within his radius. Daemons will fade into the warp faster, and they're incredibly rare. And actually, the only way that they found out he was one, because Kane had no idea. Is a barbarian maybe? Kinda. I think so. He's not ragey though. He's like he's described as phlegmatic, like very just kind of blah at all times. Like nothing bothers him. You know, whatever. He doesn't care. You tell him to do something, he does it. He doesn't care the circumstances. Like, you know, he's just so like unshakable. So I don't think barbarian's quite what I would classify him as. I think the best I would do is like he'd be like a fighter. I think. Um, but like, you know, an anti-magic fighter specifically. Uh, um, but yeah, blanks are actually more rare than psychers. As a little tidbit there. So that's also part of what has helped Kane stay alive as long as he has, is having Jurgen by his side. And he didn't know he was a blank until Kane's first book. What is it? For the Emperor. There you go. That's his first book, is For the Emperor. Where he meets Amberly, and Amberly has a psyker with her, and he's like helping her get into like a transport, and the psyker like has a seizure and passes out. That's how they figure out he's a blank. There are also some blanks that are so powerful that they just, like, psychers will just die. Jurgen is a Renfield. I don't know what that is. But yeah, some blanks are so powerful they'll psychers will die just getting within a radius of them. He's not quite there, but he's, yeah. Poor Amberly's psyker. Rakel. Rakel, that's her name. I don't know how that's spelled. Ad starts in 12 seconds. And I'll talk about a little bit more about Kane, and then, yeah, there's one more after him. Well, two. But yeah. So let's see. Oh yeah. So I sort of mentioned it, but he had a personal archive as like a almost like one long deathbed confession, except he's not dying while he's making this. He'll go for Dracula, who has his own abilities, but not on the same level as Dracula. Gotcha. Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Although, because blanks are so rare, Jurgen is actually almost more valuable than Kane is, sort of. At least to the Inquisition, because, like I said, blanks are so rare, and like obviously you can see, you know, how useful a blank could be for an Inquisitor specifically, especially Ordo Malleus or Hereticus. But yeah. Oh man, this is running long. I thought I was gonna have enough material, and I'm going way over already. And I still have like, gosh, I still have to talk about Gaunt and Rain, and then my final thoughts. Oh man, can't believe I've been talking about Commissars for almost 3 hours now. Goodness gracious. No wonder my throat is bothering me. And I'm out of beverages. It's alright, I'll live. Goodness gracious. Oh. Yeah, I legitimately wasn't sure if I was going to have enough material, and I very clearly overprepared. All right. So, just a little bit more about Kane. Let's see here. Yeah. So, I've ventured Inquisitor Vale, Amberley Vale before. She's his actual like serious love interest. Like he's banged a bunch of broads beforehand. Um, but they were like just side pieces, effectively like one night stands that he would um, get to know very shallowly. Like there are some that he has attachments to that they get mentioned by name, but for the most part, they're just they're his piece while he's on campaign on a certain world. Up until he meets Amberley Vale, and he actually like love at first sight kind of shit. And she, with her ability to like read people as an inquisitor, like almost immediately sees through like the masks that he wears, like to the point of where they're sitting in a bar after I can't remember what happened exactly, but they're sitting in a bar, and he's panicking that she's like could see through all his masks, and she's like, "Oh, you can just be yourself," and he just panics even more because he's like, I don't even know who the real Kane is anymore," kind of thing. Like, it's great, but aside from Jurgen, she's probably the only other person in the galaxy he like trusts. Not as much as Jurgen, but more than basically anybody else. Um, so yeah, she's an important part of him. She's actually the one um, uh, who finds his archive, like his unedited, like here's my big confession archive. She's the one who finds it and like edits it and distributes it to the Inquisition. So yeah, so just to finish up one little. If you got plenty, make this a series. If anything, you can do the other Commissars next week. You can even go into the more of other things. Oh, I'm gonna finish. We're gonna be finishing this. I'm finishing what I got on notes, and then that way it's all just in one place. Um, so not to worry. I'll sleep is for the week. Uh, um, but yeah. So one final little trivia bit about Kane is he's defied death so many times. Like there have been so many times during his career that like everyone from the outside thought he was dead. That the Munitorum has a standing decree that no matter what, doesn't matter if how he is reported as being dead, he's to never be removed from the active duty roster ever. Because there's been so many occasions where they're like, "Oh yeah, he's dead." They did all the paperwork, he was dead, and then he's like, "Oh shit, he's not dead." Well, crap, we gotta undo all this stuff, and it's happened so many times that he's permanently on the active duty list. So what that means is that he is the only person in the Imperium that has been listed as being on active service while simultaneously being buried with full military honors. Um, yeah, it's great. And so there's kind of a fun like in community joke that he's going to end up being a living saint, just because every time something bad happens to him, he's like, oh, the Emperor's got a fucked up sense of humor. And so it's like one kind of like big cosmic fuck you. He's like, Kane, you thought you were dead and your service was over. Lol, no, living saint. So that's kind of the joke. But yeah, if you want to read about Kane, he has his own series written by Sandy Mitchell. Like I said, they're my recommendation for new folks getting into 40k because it's more lighthearted, but still covers, still gives you the idea that the universe is pretty dark. So it's a nice kind of way to ease into 40k as a setting, in my opinion. All right. So moving on from Kane is another commissar that I've mentioned. And he is the rare commissar given a command rank exception. I'm talking about Colonel Commissar Abraham Gaunt. Of all the ones given command ranks, he's the only one that I know of that's a Colonel Commissar. And he has his own series of books with his regiment. But basically, Gaunt was given command of 3 regiments, actually. He was supposed to... he's promoted to Colonel Commissar as like a deathbed promotion. While he was serving with the Hyrcan 8th. And this was given to him by Warmaster Slato of the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. And, or no, it wasn't of the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. Oh, yes, it was. Yes, it was. Wait, hold on. I may have my information mixed up here. Oh, no, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So this was an assault on the world of Belhout during the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, and Warmaster Slato, the Warmaster of the Crusade at that time, was injured during this action, and this basically was like a huge turning point. I don't know if it was a huge turning point for the Crusade as a whole, but at least in a significant portion of it. And so, as a reward, on his deathbed, Warmaster Slato was like, "Okay, here you go. Here's a command rank, which entitled him to 3 regiments. These regiments were from the world of Tanith. That's Tanith, Tanith, who were going through their first founding. So he was going to have command of the Tanith 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. However, I want to say the day of or the day after he arrived on Tanith, a Chaos splinter of a Chaos Warfleet assaulted Tanith, and this is like more of a backwater planet. Like it wasn't heavily populated, kind of out of the way. So and this was their first founding, so there wasn't a lot of defenses there, and so he is faced with an extremely difficult choice. Does he take these newly founded regiments and escape from Tanith, or does he stay and they are guaranteed to all die to a man? Dying with their planet, essentially. But so, Gaunt decides he is going to take... He's going to flee with the Tanith regiments. Now, of those 3 regiments, he's only able to retrieve effectively the Tanith 1st, which is about 4,000 men. None of their senior officers survived. It was just NCOs downward, so the bulk of 1 regiment. And they all hated him for it. They hated him for making that call. They wanted to stay and die with their families and, die defending their planet. And Gaunt's like, nah, we're gonna leave. And they, all of them, except for one of them, hated his guts to start with. But through, and he's, like I said, Gaunt's the one who leads through, displays of valor. And so he manages to forge the Tanith 1st and only out of these 4,000 men. Bumps NCOs up to, officer ranks. His 2nd actually was from Tanith, Colin Corbeck. As like a show of solidarity with him and the Tanith men, and yeah. So yeah, he eventually manages to gain the respect and admiration of most of them, but there are some who literally want to kill him. There's actually one particular character who, on several occasions, tries to kill him. Yeah, so you'll have to read to find out about him. But yeah, he wants to kill Gaunt, and tries to on a few different occasions. So yeah, So they were. So after he reorganizes them and gets them at least into fighting shape to a point, and names them the Tanith First and Only. They go to their first combat operation on the world of Blackshard, where they are victorious, and that's where they're given their nickname Gaunt's Ghosts. Partially, it's because they have like a trademark black fatigues and like camo cloaks that they wear always. Is part of it, and the other reason is because they are literally the last remnants of people from Tanith. These men are all that remains of Tanith. They're the ghosts of Tanith, Gaunt's ghosts. So yeah, that's part of it too. But aside from their trademark cloaks and black fatigues, they also carry 30 centimeter long war knife. I think it's silver plated, or it looks silver, which they call the Tanith Straight Silver, and that's like a mark of passage. Like you're not considered a part of the Tanith First and Only unless you have the cloak and one of those knives. Like it's like the knives are a big deal. But he's also he's compassionate for his men, for the ghosts. So he doesn't waste their lives on stupid assaults. And he's very he actually butts heads a lot with the upper echelons of Imperial Guard Command because he insists on them being used in the best way possible. And what I mean by that is that they are known for scouting in force and stealth operations. Like they are galaxy class stealth troopers. And so he equates them to a scalpel. Deadly if used correctly, but fragile. These are not frontline heavy assault troops. They're not meant for garrison duty. They're meant to find the enemy, kill them quietly, or find them and weaken them quietly until the main force can move up and finish the job. Very, very not specifically focused, but very specifically focused. They can do these other things, but they're not built for it. They're built for scouting and stealth and that sort of thing. And so he often would get into it with Imperial High Command, or at least the Crusade High Command over the way the ghosts were being assigned. So yeah, he was actually kind of feared by the upper echelons because his style of leadership was so different from what the norm has been. Insisting on using his forces correctly, not throwing away their lives, actually caring about the men under his command instead of seeing them as a number to throw at the enemy. So yeah, he's unique. He's also a fantastic leader, swordsman. He ends up with a power sword. I won't spoil how. I was in one of his books. But yeah, yep. Ibrahim Gaunt, Colonel Commissar Ibrahim Gaunt. If you want to read more about him and his ghosts, again, this is another Dan Abnett series. The Gaunt's Ghost series. I can't remember the name of the first book because it's been a long time. But they are some of the best Black Library literature. Like even for Dan Abnett, I'm talking like overall Black Library books. The Gaunt's Ghost books are like top 3 series. Like they are wonderfully written. The characters are fantastic, like from Gaunt all the way down through the ghosts. They're all great characters with a lot of depth. Like there's one character that and I'm sure Eris knows exactly who I'm talking about. There's one character in that series that I absolutely fucking hated. And I was so incredibly happy when he finally was killed. But yeah, yeah. It's a series of books where you actually really grow attached to characters, or like really loathe certain characters. And yeah, Abnett just does a fantastic job with the series. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just a great series. I highly recommend them. But yeah, so the last commissar I'm going to talk about, I know the least about her because she's the newest that's been introduced to the canon as far as like an actual named commissar, and that is Commissar Severina Rain. She only has one book out right now by Rachel Harrison. It's called Otterbound, and I'm only part of the way through it, so I don't have a ton of knowledge about her, unfortunately. All I know is that she was attached to the 11th Antari Rifles, who were deployed to the world of Drast, Drast, which is under the control of of a chaos cult within the region of space known as the Bane Stars. But yeah, from what I've seen, she's a bad bitch. She's hardcore. Leans more into the Yerrick style of leadership. Honestly, I really need to restart her book because I listened to some of like quarter of it, then I didn't for like months, and started listening to it again. I think I need to start over. But the big thing that kind of I remember is, so she was attached to the 11th Antari, who were given an order to assault this position, and their captain refused to obey the order because he was saying that, if they assault this position, all of my men are going to die trying to take this position. I'm not doing it. Which sounds reasonable until you realize there is a commissar there, and to refuse an order from Imperial High Command, you get executed for that. And he was actually really popular with his men. Like, his men really liked him. And Rain was like, okay, and drops him on the spot and takes command for herself at that point. So that kind of tells you how devoted she is to duty. So she seems, like I said, more kind of into the Yerrick end of the scale, the more traditional, stereotypical commissar. But again, I really need to restart her book and get a better feel for her character. But that's what I can recall. So those are the four big commissars that I wanted to talk about. Now on to the final section. Why do I love commissars? Why do I love them? Well, there's a lot of reasons. And I think it's just because of how multifaceted they are. They're superlative warriors, they're commanders, they're demagogues, they're diplomats. Some commissars will focus on only the war side of things. Some will focus, more on the diplomacy side of things, the morale side of things. But I think the best ones are kind of the ones that do a little bit of all of it. Now, again, Yerrick's kind of an outlier. He has this huge reputation to where, he doesn't need to necessarily worry about having to execute a trooper. Like, he's so far up the chain now. Like, that's, he's to the point of being a figurehead. Like, and Kane's kind of the same way. But Yerrick is like, he's the guy. He's the old man. Like, he's being referred to or deferred to by Space Marines and such. So he's the outlier. But as far as like what I consider to be the most interesting characters are the ones that are multifaceted, like Kane and Gaunt. I love those guys because they're so far beyond the this trooper's running away, blam, kind of deal. Like, there's so much weight to their actions, at least with Gaunt. Like, again, Kane is a little more lighthearted about stuff, but the way that he thinks through situations is very interesting to me. Like he's a coward pretending to be a hero, and somehow in his process of pretending to be a hero, he is actually a hero. Like in his cowardice, he's actually brave because the things that he has to do to what he perceives to do to save his own skin and to, live to an honorable retirement is, does require a lot of bravery. Like, he had to. One of the stories I read or listened to recently, he had to go through a sewer infested with undead Nurgle zombies to bring like a cure to this plague to use in gas shells, and he was like, okay, well, I could do that, or I could stay up here on the surface and try to fight off this horde of zombies. All right, well, I'm going to do this. Well, in so doing, he finds, the Chaos Cultist directing all this and kills him and breaks the control over these zombies. Doesn't kill them, but it removes their direction, so they're just mindless zombies again instead of being driven in a direction. And then is successful in delivering this vaccine that's then shot through gas shells and kills off the zombies. But it takes a lot of bravery to go down into a fucking sewer. Granted, he didn't know the zombies were there, but there's the possibility certainly was. And to do that does take bravery, and there's stuff like that happens all the time with this guy. Gaunt the man just has so many bad things happen to him. Like the Imperial High Command most of them are constantly in his way, are constantly causing him problems. Like there's actually an Imperial Guard regiment that I'm forgetting the name of, that hate him and the ghosts, and so have done deliberate things to get them killed. Like in one of his books, I believe, they knew they were closer to the enemy than they had told Regimental High Command, so they had a bunch of artillery, friendly artillery, land in them because of certain commanders and certain regiments, and there's stuff like that happens to him all the time. So, it's interesting to just see how he deals with that, and to see the characterization of him and how much he cares for these, the last remnants of Tanith, these literally, almost extinct, group of people, and they have all this, all this culture that's lost, or is only preserved by these, couple thousand men. And so he's also, in a way, carrying the weight of this entire world on his shoulders. Keeping his men alive and leading them as best he can. And so it's just, there's to me, the Commissars are some of the most interesting and have some of the most depth out of any 40k characters that I've seen, and they just have so many things that they have to do, so many things that they are responsible for, and there's just so many layers of things that you don't even really think about. For example, Krieg regiments have commissars, there are Death Corps of Krieg commissars that get assigned to other places, but I mean regular ass commissars get assigned to Death Corps regiments. And you don't know anything about the Death Corps, they pride themselves on sacrificing themselves in the line of duty, and are wholly devoted to the God Emperor, super loyal, willing to sacrifice themselves. Why would you think they would need a morale officer? They don't, they never have broken morale. Well, the reason why they have a commissar is so the commissar can act as a buffer between the Death Corps and the rest of the Imperial Guard, and is there to get the Death Corps regiment to work better with the Imperial Guard as a liaison. Because the Death Corps, the way that they operate is so, even by the Imperial Guard standards, who don't really care about losses too much, are so far beyond that they're almost alien to the rest of the Imperial Guard. And so they need this commissar to, keep them grounded, to keep them, at least relatable enough to the rest of the Imperial Guard to function effectively with them. And that's an aspect that I never really thought about until I read what was it? Dead Men Walking. It's a Krieg book. But yeah, so there's so many different angles to these characters, and there's so many different situations you can put them in. And yeah, plus, I mean, they have fantastic style. I mean, come on. There's no arguing with that. They just have amazing style. And like overall, if you think about it, they have probably the single most difficult job in the Imperial Guard, because they're effectively responsible for everyone in the Imperial Guard. They have to keep everyone up to the mark. They have to keep everybody pure. Morale needs to be where it needs to be. So these thousands of men will throw themselves into the meat grinder, willingly-ish enough. Encourage these guys to face impossible odds, with maybe no hope of victory whatsoever, and encourage these men through guile, wit, fear, whatever, to die for the cause. And it's just, I don't know, it's pretty crazy to me. I adore them immensely. That's why actually my first original 40k character that I came up with was a Commissar. Colonel Commissar Parator Primus. Yes, I made him a Colonel Commissar. No, I don't care. But yeah, so they're probably my favorite character archetype out of all of 40k. Don't get me wrong, I love my Space Marines immensely. But if I had to pick one archetype in 40k above all others, like, Commissars are at the top of the list. I absolutely love Commissars. So, yeah, that's it for me, folks. I have been rambling on about Commissars for the last 3 hours and 20 minutes. Holy shit. I really did not think I was going to have that enough material. Turns out I had way more than I needed, which I'm not complaining about. So thank you all for joining me. I will be back 2 weeks from now with more lore. Tomorrow, I believe Pig is going to be doing some more engine nerding, whatever. Thank you, Kat. I'm glad you appreciated it. Starting at the same time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And then Wednesday will be the full crew. So that's me, Pig, and Z. Still have no idea what we're playing yet because, we're super awesome like that. But when we do have that figured out, I will definitely tell you guys through Twitter. And if you would do me the fantastic honor of following the official Mornival Gaming Twitter account, that's at Mornival Gaming, shocker, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm trying to direct all announcements coming from that account, because right now it's coming out of my account, which I don't mind, but I want to allow people to, if they only want to, get unfiltered notifications about the streams, there's an account for that instead of, going through all my BS that I post every day to find stuff. So, if you wouldn't mind following that account, I'd appreciate it. I am trying to announce more things more through that. Other than that, and Z actually will be going back through doing more Fallout 4 on Thursday, and then I don't think anybody's doing anything Friday. So maybe I'll do a late surprise something, but whatever. No promises. I would have liked to have taken questions, but this, like I said, this ran almost an hour longer than I had originally intended. So, yeah, thank you all for joining me. I hope you appreciate the new theme song I came up with for this. I did, like I said, write most of it, not all of it, then ran it through Suno. So, anyway, thank you again. Please like, subscribe, and if there's any parts that you missed or if you want to rewatch it, the VOD will be up on YouTube as I was streaming to there simultaneously, and YouTube saves the VODs, and unlike Twitch, will still be there beyond 7 days. So, anyway, thank you again, and have a good night, guys.